All right, at 7 o'clock, I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. I'll first ask Selectman Muska to lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, all members of the Board of Selectmen are here in presence. I would ask for an added agenda item as 9I, which is to discuss and potentially approve the request from the Connecticut Electric Railway Company to serve as their Neighborhood Assistance Act sponsor.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. In the interest of trying to, well, let's go for a little while and see what we do. I might move some things around. Approval of minutes from April 4th.
I'll move to approve the April 4th, 2024 Board of Selectmen regular meeting minutes.
Is there a second? Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? At the risk of pressing my luck, May 2nd.
Move to approve the May 2nd, 2024 Board of Selectmen regular meeting minutes.
Is there a second? Discussion.
Yes, I do have some corrections.
Okay,
On page 3, the vote, there was a vote and it has Marie being in favor and opposed. On page 3.
Yep.
And how which way it was?
Is that on the criminal correction?
no, it's on the April 18th meeting minutes. I think there is no one opposed.
See if I, it says you're in favor and opposed. Yeah, and then opposed. So what you opposed right here, the two said opposed.
Oh. I don't think I would put a false correction for spelling error.
Okay, and also under public participation, from Noreen Farmer, it says the testimony submitted on the state's website was from the East Windsor Police Commission. It was actually submitted by the chairman of the police commission, not the police
That is
commission.
correct. Thank you for the correction.
And that was all that I have for corrections.
Any other corrections?
I have a couple.
Okay.
On page 6, item 12, executive session. It says, Keith Aguilar has recused himself to the executive session. Actually, I recused myself only for the Wolford store part of the executive session,
Correct.
and I did attend the other part.
Correct.
And then on the motion to, when we came out of executive session, there was a motion to approve and hold the whole harmless agreement. It says first selectman noted that Selectman Yakloff had to leave executive session, and that he was in favor of this motion. No issue with that, but then it has to be voting.
Right, I missed that. That's true.
And I have a third item. Okay. Then on page 2, part of the April 4th, 2024 motion to postpone the Board of Selectmen regular meeting minutes. Then it says, underneath it says the board is deliberated on the correction of minutes and the process of approving the minutes. And then it says the correction of previous meeting minutes must be published in the subsequent meeting minutes. But we had a discussion, but we didn't agree or anything. We said we were going to come back with more information from FOIA and I said Robert's Rules of Orders issue. So
let's strike that last sentence.
correct. Thank you.
Any other corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public participation is one of 2 opportunities for the members of the public to address the Board of Selectmen. I'd ask that you first identify yourself by your name and address and state your business. First, I'll turn to anybody who's in the room who'd like to speak to the board, and then I'll provide anybody online with the same opportunity. Is there anyone in the room who would like to address the members of the Board of Selectmen? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Boston. also chairman of the WPCA, so I have an issue with, item 12 as described. Since this is a public document. It says that we're gonna have an executive session strategy pertaining to litigation WPCA, so. Is that the intent of the town to through the WPCA?
It should say litigation and negotiations, which is the exemption under FOIA. Negotiations was omitted in error.
With the WPCA?
Correct.
Litigation.
Negotiation.
Slash
The
negotiation.
exception is for litigation and negotiations. We're talking about negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir. Name and address.
Bill House, 44 Melrose Road. 5 years when I was on the CIP committee, one of the top priorities was the replacement of the roof on the firehouse.
Mhm.
Last week, there was water coming in through the roof, into the light fixtures upstairs. We have people asleep overnight over there from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning. And we can't have that water come down through the fixtures because of mold coming in. So I noticed that this year's CIP, that roof is still not on the CIP. So I don't want to know when that's going to be done.
Thank you, sir. Other public comment? Is there anyone online who would like to address the members of the Board of Selectmen? Hearing none, there will be another opportunity later in the meeting. May 27th is the Warehouse Point Memorial Day Parade. We've been invited to participate. I know some of us are going to be there, some of us are not going to be there, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the invitation has been extended. Also, on the 26th is the Melrose Parade, which I believe to be the shortest parade in America. It goes from one side of the street to the other side of the street. That is actually a really fun ceremony, and it starts at 2 p.m. We've been invited to that as well, so if you're able to join for one or both of those, mark your calendars. We have a couple of resignations. Peter Larice, as you all know, has moved out of East Windsor, and he submitted a resignation from the Building Commission. I have a motion on that, please.
We'll move to accept the resignation of Peter Larice from the Building Commission with regret.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So. Karen Gaudreau has resigned as Registrar of Voters, effective May 3rd. May I have a motion?
Move to approve the resignation of Karen Gaudreau as Registrar with regret.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I would just like to thank Karen for her many years of service to the town. As you could see in her letter, was serving the town for 43 years, and I think that's a long time, and she deserves our thanks for that.
Well said. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And Angelo Severino has submitted his resignation effective tomorrow, or actually tonight at midnight, as Registrar of Voters on the Democratic side. Is there a motion?
Move to accept the resignation of Angelo Severino as Registrar with regret.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
There's no. Also like to thank Angelo for his time. He did a lot of work getting that professionalized, and I thank him for his time.
Well said. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Donna Grant's term on the Agricultural Commission is expiring, and she'd like to be reappointed. Her new term would expire June 6th, 2027. Is there a motion?
Move to reappoint Donna Grant to the Agricultural Commission as a regular member for a term expiring June 6th, 2027.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So. Patty Prattville. We're gonna, we had some questions from our last meeting. Please come on up. We had some questions from our last meeting about tax refunds, particularly a 5 or 6 year look back. We've talked about this offline, but I wanted to give you, actually at the board's request, I'm going to ask you to provide an overview as to what's going on there and what our statutory requirements are. So the floor is yours, Matt.
I would like to invite at this time Helen Tots, our assessor, to this,
I didn't even see how.
yeah,
I'm
Helen's
sorry.
here. And this statute really is in her wheelhouse, not mine. So for the veterans, Helen stated when we were talking offline that, 2 years ago, I believe it is, that, we were allowed to go back 6 years, 3 years for the assessor, 3 years for the tax collector. And as of last year, July of 22, they have now put it all on the assessor to make those type of corrections or adjustments for veterans. It is a state statute, and it allows the municipality to go back 6 years only for veterans. That would be the only reason you can go back that far. So.
And that's section 12-128 of the general statutes. But in the past, it had been up to the assessor to certify for 3 years that veteran was indeed qualified for the exemption. It was for some reason not applied. We had to do a certificate of correction to apply it. And then the veteran would have to go to the tax collector for 3 years more if they had paid up to 6 years erroneously. This just simplifies the process to prove to the assessor that they are qualified for the exemption, and we do the corrections for 6 years. Then it goes to Patty. Statute lays it right out. It goes to Patty. Patty recommends to the board for the refund.
So when refunds come to you, they've gone through Helen, they've gone through me, and so by the time you guys get them, they've been washed a lot.
They've been vetted.
They've been a lot before you guys get them.
We're pretty. And it's only for veterans that
Yeah.
we can go back 6 years.
Right.
Questions?
Yeah, but what's the criteria for a veteran to apply?
A veteran qualifies for exemption by proving that they've served a minimum of 90 days active duty during the time of war and received an honorable DD 214 for discharge from the qualifying
Services.
Army, Navy, Marine, Coast Guard, Air Force.
Space Force?
You know, I almost said that, but they haven't put that in this particular statute yet.
So they
But I'm
have to-
sure it's
They
coming.
have to actively served in a,
Active
Yeah.
duty, time of war, 90 days.
They usually live
Or-
in wars that
So-
they,
how
yeah.
many people do we have? That
Oh,
roughly,
surprisingly not that many, 300, give or take,
and you only had one individual that,
this year so far.
So
Yeah,
far.
That went back in.
yeah.
It's
We
relative
seldom,
It will. only-
it doesn't happen too often, and that's why the question, it is new that it's,
and the reason why I
Oh, yeah,
the
questioned it,
tax collector.
I questioned it originally last month and why we didn't do anything with it, is because when I looked up the property owner's address, it was a trustee account. And-
Yes, it's for her, a veteran who qualifies by the criteria I just said, or property held in trust for. So we review the trust to make sure that the
Okay, well, that
property
was
is in
maybe
the
my next
trust.
question, but that was reviewed to make sure, okay.
Yep.
All right, then I'm good with it, thank you.
There, for the board's information, there was a new piece of legislation that was passed. It's not yet effective, but I have the public act printed out that allows for an additional property tax exemption for veterans who are wounded, permanently disabled in active line of duty. So that is something I'm going to ask the board to consider in the next couple of months to implement that.
Today,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just.
Yeah,
passed.
Melissa just sent that forward to us, and I'm sure you know about it, but yeah.
Any other questions for these ladies?
Just a couple. Sure. So I saw tonight, there's one person that was doing multiple years, that's when. you're
Right,
talking about.
that's, yeah,
And I
that's,
was wondering why we're going back. The amounts are Like, is it like 5% or something?
Right now, the base amount of exemption is $1,500 off the assessment.
Okay.
That also is going to change with the new public act that just went into effect in 24-46.
So in case anyone thinks that like the veterans are getting huge
No.
benefits or not, it's very
It's-
small,
It's a very small amount considering, yes.
like, considering all that they've done for their
Yep.
service. And then the 6-year look back where they can get that, recover that, they have to make an application, not
Yes.
just for the exemption, but for the look back.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes,
So-
they have to request a refund of what they've paid.
So there's a whole lot of veterans that are receiving the benefit but haven't requested the look back yet.
No, because usually what will happen, and I think it was in this case, a veteran will leave town, go to another town, come back, not notify the assessor they're back. We don't know to start applying the exemption again, and it gets overlooked. Because it isn't really a lot of money that they're dealing with. Sometimes it takes them a while to realize.
And I had a question similar to Marie's, it might actually be the same question, but I think it might be different. So out of, I don't, we don't really know how many people in town would qualify, because no one's done a survey of veterans that qualified. Or
Well-
yes, do we know what percentage of people we have that are taking advantage of the program versus what they're out in the community who would be eligible?
We do public relations notifications, in the Five Village Voice, in the newspaper, online, on our webpage. The services themselves at time of discharge will recommend that the veteran touch base with the town hall. We do a lot to make sure we have everybody who is qualified.
Even those that come to the tax office, you know, we question them. If we see any type of military emblem, are you a veteran? Because we'll check their tax bill, and if they aren't receiving it, we'll go, hey, if you're a veteran, you need to go see the assessor's office. We try and give veterans as much as we possibly can.
Right, and I appreciate you coming and describing it so that all of us listening here can spread the word too,
Mhm.
and make sure we
Definitely.
pass it out to the community and try to get it out there, because even though it's not a lot, it's for veterans that are struggling financially and make a huge difference for them.
And just to interject, there are additional programs above the base 1,500 based on income. So we also advertise those by application. We take applications up through November 1st each year, and that can increase what they're getting with the base. And if they have any kind of VA disability rating, they get an increase.
For all of our tax assistance programs, whether they be senior or disabled or veterans, we do the maximum that is allowable under the law.
Yes.
Yeah. It would be nice if there were more, but we do to the ceiling with everything we're allowed to do.
Yeah, we really do, you know, promoted in the office. If they complain about their taxes or anything. We're like, have you been down to the assessor's office? And, you know, we check their records to make sure that they are receiving what they can. So we really do try to help the elderly, the disabled, the veterans, to make sure that they are, you know, taken care of.
Any other questions for Patty or Helen? Yes.
Just because I couldn't quite hear what you said, just for clarification. My question wasn't because I have anything negative to say about anybody in the.
Oh, no.
I come from a long line of military
Mhm.
people and I have great respect. So that was never my intent. It was just to educate myself so that I would know what to say to somebody if they come up to me
Sure.
to ask me something, so.
And it gives us a chance to explain to everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Keep getting delivered.
Yeah, make sure everyone gets the benefits.
Thank you, ladies. We appreciate
You're
you.
welcome. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Too.
Mrs. Mulcahy. Good evening. So at our last meeting, there were some questions around the vetting process for the exemption waiver for the consumption of alcohol on town properties, particularly East Windsor Park. Can you explain a little bit about how that all works?
Sure, so when we get a pavilion rental reservation through our MyRec system, the person that is in charge of the party goes through and fills out the online application. They reserve their date, it goes through my staff. We have a phone conversation with them. We ask them, what the party is for. All of that information is then entered into the system. If they ask for the process or the application for the alcohol exemption, we forward them that application and, we start the vetting process that way, ask them a little bit about what the party is going to be, who's going to be there, what types of drinks they might be serving. We do not provide any type of alcohol to them for their parties. We don't sell it. We aren't even there most of the time. Except if the park is open, our staff is on property. They go through the process of printing the application, submitting it to my office. I go through, review it, have a phone conversation with them, and then I send it off to the chief of police, and then through the fire marshal's office, and then to you guys. So as long as all three of us sign off on it, and then you guys sign off on it, and they purchase the Gather Guard insurance, which is the insurance policy that they must participate in, whether they're having alcohol or not. They have to purchase the Gather Guard insurance policy to even have an event at the park. Everything is covered, and this is all run by Kerma, who's our insurance people, and they assume the risk to have the party in itself.
Thank you. Questions or comments from Melissa? Keith?
Melissa, we had I had some questions about the vetting, and then I saw one of them, the police chief signed off, and another one, the fire marshal and the police chief signed off, or he signed off. Did someone actually talk to the person who's applying, or is it just based?
So when I get the application, I call them on the phone and I have a conversation about what the event is going to be.
Okay, and then in terms of their obligations, particularly around alcohol, they know that not just from what's in writing, but someone tells them, where they have to buy the insurance, right? So is that?
They always have to, whether you're having a birthday party or a party with alcohol, you have to purchase the insurance. It's part of the policy.
I was at the community garden a couple of weekends ago, and I was walking by twice during that day, and in the early part of the day, it looked like a party, like one of the scheduled people using the space there. There were a whole bunch of cars, primarily towards the pond, their side of it, and I call it the pond, the swimming area. And then later in the day, there were a lot of cars, like, huge number of cars over by the pavilion side. And I know that was their music and it was an event of some sort. And I want to ask you, it's nothing against people having a good time and doing events, but it was like spread out, like all over the parking lot was totally consumed, and the pavilion was totally consumed, and the other side of the parking lot was consumed. And I was wondering if someone wanted to go in and use the playground or something, it might feel a little bit, I don't say intimidating, but it might be hard because, there's a big event there. Everybody is occupying all the spaces. Do we have areas that we can designate for folks that want to go in there to be able to park and everything if there's a big event? Or we don't really know how big it's going to be until people come in?
So the events that you're alluding to, the two parties that were there were not registered through us. They just showed up and had a birthday party.
Oh.
Which the park it's a park, so you can do that. The event that was up at the pavilion was a memorial service. And that was rented through us or reserved through us. So that space was reserved for that individual's memorial service.
And no alcohol was served.
And no alcohol was served. So to say that I could quarantine off areas for people to congregate, we wouldn't be able to rent the pavilion then at that point.
No, I was wondering, because the playground just opened up.
Mhm.
And
Well-
the parking will pass the playground, the area. So
Yeah.
you have to go in there, see there's a private event, and then find your way in there. But let me ask you about private parties, so people, going back to the alcohol issue, there's folks that do go through the process, get the insurance, and they register and they're vetted, right? But if a large group of people just shows up and uses it as a gathering, there's no restrictions on that, you're saying, right? Like 200 people can show up and just use.
So the
park.
people that are renting must tell us how many people they're expecting at their party, because if they're over 100 people, they have to rent both sides of the pavilion. If it's less than 100, then they're just to one side unless they rent both sides.
But if they just show up, a group of people said, we're gonna all meet there, we're gonna have a big gathering there.
Right.
And we're gonna use the, show up at the pavilion space, 100 people come.
Mhm.
That's okay for that kind of like gathering,
So we have signs up there that say that the pavilion is for rentals only
right?
and to contact our office. If we have an issue with a rental, we give them our telephone number. And if they show up and there's someone occupying their space before their rental begins, they call us and we come in and ask those individuals to leave because it is rented.
And do the police know if they see a large gathering there and they would say, would they know it's not like rented and would they be able to go in and say, check to see if there's consumption of alcohol in a park? Or large gatherings that are not planned and people just show up?
We have a great working relationship with the police department here in East Windsor, and anytime that we call them for any kind of unsecured area or people that shouldn't be in there or suspicious people, they come when we ask them to. So I'm assuming that if we did reach out to them, they would do the same for active patrols.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that anybody would be like committing crimes or suspicious or anything just because they were there. I think the fundamental issue was concerned about alcohol consumption at the park, because people can't go into the park and consume alcohol on town property
They
without
can't.
going through this process and getting.
Well, they're not supposed to,
Right,
but I can tell you that I can't police that 24/7, 365 days a year. I mean, we do our best to ask them to follow our protocol and our policies and do the best we can with that without having it staffed all the time.
right.
Any other comments or questions for Melissa? Thank you. Thanks for bringing your kids.
Oh, no problem. They're happy.
Bye, Nico. Okay, next is a discussion and possible vote on a registrar's compensation issue. Ms. O'Toole, you want to start us off?
Sure. So you guys should have papers in front of you.
Yep.
So I was submitted for early voting in April. I was submitted for additional hours, for between March 15th and March 25th prior to early voting. And then I was also submitted for training hours on each of the early voting days. Our registrars get paid $16,500 a year, which is $633 every 2 weeks, whether they work 0 hours or whether they work 50 hours. Prior to early voting, there was never additional compensation other than the election days. With early voting, they're now getting paid for early voting days, but in this case, this is mostly prep or training for individuals that were gonna work with early voting. They were looking for an hourly rate. They don't get paid an hourly rate. They get a stipend, whether they work 0 hours or 50 hours. So I use the state statute, which is 9.55A, that allows us to pay them $35 a day when they go to the ROGAC training days. And didn't pay anybody for the half an hour before the early voting because everybody already got paid a half an hour before and a half an hour after. The 8-hour early voting days, we're paying everybody for a stipend for 9 hours, the equivalent of 9 hours, giving them time before and time after. So I felt those people had already been paid. So I wasn't gonna pay more dollars to them for a job we already paid them for. So, so my proposal was $35 a day, so Karen would have gotten 6 days, Angela would have gotten 1, Mark Simmons would have gotten 2, and Denise Menard would have gotten 2. I got back that this requires further discussion. I don't know how or why you took it upon yourself to come up with other than what I submitted. However, $3.13 per hour of training is not acceptable. So here we are. I mean, we spent a lot of time during the budget process about early voting, about coming up with reasonable amounts of stipends, the difference between 16-hour days or 9-hour days or 13-hour days. So, we didn't talk about additional hours that in the past has always been covered under the stipend.
So I've got people leaning forward. Anything else you want to?
I don't think so.
Sarah?
No, I mean, can Mrs. Goodrow speak to where the discrepancy is? Just,
That's what I was getting to
Thank you.
next, but you guys both seem.
sorry, well,
Right,
no, I
well-
just would like to hear.
Sure, go ahead.
The early voting days for that time frame were the 26th, 27th, 28th, and the 30th. And that's with a half hour before and a half hour after for the workers get. But these dates, the 15, 17, 18, 21, 22, and 25, I don't believe that's training for the poll workers. I think that's individual training for the registered. And I could be wrong, but clarification is needed for me.
So on the bottom of the email, I talk about, I didn't make any additional payments for the 27th through the 30th, as these employees above were all paid a certain dollar amount for each of those days, and other employees were paid for the half an hour before and half an hour after. So these half an hours, I'm assuming, is either before the early voting started that are on these sheets, the yellow sheet with the half an hours for all the other people.
I know on the 26th, 27th, 28th, and the 30th. We worked from 9:30 to 6:30, 9:30 to 6:30 is what we got paid, the thing was 10 to 6. So I have my opinion on that, but these dates up here are prior to the early voting.
Just for the 4 people that were listed.
Right,
Everything else on this sheet for everybody else is actually the 26th through the 30th. That's where they're trying to pay. That was the sheet that I got. They were trying to pay an additional half an hour for each person for every day for the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, and the 30th.
oh, I don't see that on this.
As training.
I didn't see that on this cover letter, that's why.
Well, I talk about in the cover letter that I'm not paying for the 27th through the 30th because I felt like I already paid everybody.
I don't believe that was ever asked for, that's my.
Yep. On this yellow sheet, each person, in addition to the 4 people I listed already, everybody else is on here. For whatever days they worked early voting for a half an hour of training. For each day of early voting. In addition to what they had already been paid.
Oh, I didn't know that was happening.
Can I just ask for clarification? Are we saying that all of these people are owed additional funds or yes, correct?
That's the request.
Okay.
The request is everybody in yellow. The sheet that looks like that.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I did make up a packet. I have a mouthful of stitches, so I'm not speaking too well.
Thank you.
But it just kind of reiterates what I'm gonna say. It's nothing in addition to.
Thank you.
I guess the main reason I'm here is I'm disputing an arbitrary change made by the treasurer. Public Act 23-204, and there is a copy of it in that little packet I just gave you from the state of Connecticut that states that the grant money, and if the grant money runs out, I would say town money, people need to be paid for what they do. The Public Act and the agreement for the grant that we signed and the town signed is for labor costs, printing costs, location-related expenses, voter information, equipment, and supplies. Except for full utilization of funds, including costs directly tied to changes necessary to implement early voting. Examples include but not limited to what I just said, labor, printing. Another letter that says labor costs associated with preparing for and administering early voting, including pay for registrars working extra hours to do the early voting. I don't know what statute. Well, I originally submitted early voting workers' pay. It was rejected by the treasurer because she wanted it broken down by days. I then broke it down by days. At which point she took it upon herself to use a statute that says registrars will receive $35 per day for each conference attended. It has nothing to do with early voting. It has nothing to do with preparation, implementation. It has everything to do with conferences. Two of the people that are on here that supposedly were paid based on the conference, one did not attend the conference. But both of them, the way the statute reads is registrars will be paid or deputies in the absence of a registrar. So the one registrar that did attend should be paid for the hours he actually worked, not for attending a conference. You know, I totally disagree with her interpretation of a statute that has nothing to do with early voting. And I based our figures on what we would get paid for a 9-hour day times the number of hours. And at that point, a week or so ago, I was told I wasn't an hourly employee, but yet the state says we will be paid for all hours worked. So I think we have to take into account that the state is saying this is all brand new this year. People need to be paid for what they do. If you take the amount that I submitted compared to the amount that the treasurer is saying I should get, it's a difference of $900. The amount that is being said I should be getting is $210 for 36 hours of work. That's $5.83 an hour. That's not even federal minimum wage. And that's absolutely uncalled for. So I think, I'm hoping the Board of Selectmen will take all this into account. You have all the documentation that I have here. I'll look through it and do the right thing. As far as the training for the other workers, typically on an election day, all election workers have to come in a half an hour early and normally stay at least a half an hour after to do their reporting. They set up in the morning, they assist with the setup of the polling locations. These people were, in addition, trained on early voting. And as I said in my letter, unfortunately, my counterpart had an emergency hospitalization, was not able to participate in any of the early voting sessions. So if it was going to get done, it was going to get done, and I did it. And I don't appreciate being told I'm worth $210 for 36 hours of work. Nobody works for that amount of money. So hopefully you'll, you know, and one question I had was, what authorizes a department head to tell another department head what they're going to make for a certain function?
State statute 9.5(5)(a).
I'll look that up. Do you have a copy of that?
I have to keep it with for the Board of Comment. Says the Board of Selectmen will determine the rate.
Yes, I have a question and some comments. But they're
Let
done.
me get you so that's for
9- what? Oh,
and that's 5.5(a).
well, I don't think $5.83 is reasonable compensation. I don't know that anybody in this room would think that.
What's the statute?
9-5.5(a).
That it's approved by the selectmen of the town, it doesn't say approved by the finance director.
Right, and Amy's bringing it to, or Karen actually has brought this to us to make a determination.
Okay.
Now, also historically, the only influence that the selectmen have ever had over the, and this was an issue that we discussed during the budget process and corrected, was that the stipend was set by the board of selectmen through the budget process. The registrars historically, regardless of who the registrars have been, I don't think have ever brought the compensation scale for their employees to the selectmen as the statute suggests they are supposed to do. So this is correcting that practice as well. So, do you have anything further?
Well, I think I was pretty clear in my request, and if anybody has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Go ahead.
When did you hold training classes and who attended those training classes?
They were held on the day of early voting. But most probably they were held after the polls closed, because in the morning they were setting up. I mean, you've worked the polls, you know the amount of work to set up a poll. Afterwards, there's reporting,
I understand that.
and all day long, they were being trained for what to do in the case of early voting.
So they were being trained at the same time they were being compensated.
And they were also trained, in addition, they were trained on other days.
But I'm correct in hearing what you said, that they were trained while they were working the polls.
Partial training.
So that would.
If they had 5 or 10 minutes, yeah, we sat down with them and I sat down with them and trained them. Most of it was done when they had time afterwards.
Okay,
Who? I was there for all 4 days, no disrespect, but my training was done half hour before and half hour after. I don't know anyone that stayed past that time for training. You stayed for training?
I didn't leave it when you guys left, I can tell you that. One day, the day of the primary, I got over here and the head moderator and the town clerk were on their way out their door. That's how long I stayed that day. And I didn't get paid any extra for that.
Neither did I.
But you didn't stay till 9 or 10 o'clock at night either.
but that's not what your time sheet.
I walked out the door.
The timesheet is incorrect, and I will be the first to admit it's incorrect. I documented every hour that I trained, that I worked at setting things up, that we had to order equipment. And like I say, there was only one person doing all this work. No fault of Angelo's whatsoever. He was sick. I understand that.
Well, was it Angelo's assistant register voter was in there working on the days that I was down there, and well,
Yes,
he
I
was
was.
not able to, so. And she was sent there to help, so I'm just trying to get clarification because I'm still stuck on this documentation where there's additional pay going to those of us who worked at early voting. When I know I'm not entitled to any extra pay because I left at the right time, 6:30. So I don't know why I'm on a list to get extra pay when I didn't deserve it. But it's always been when you work at an election, as moderator, I would get paid as moderator. When I was moderator, I would get paid for that position for however long it took. And sometimes it's taken 2.5 days and
But you're talking regular, normal elections, referendums, primaries, whatever. This whole early voting is a whole new ballgame. And it's trial and error. We did the best we could. People worked the best, not the last one, but they still spent their entire day there. But
and were compensated for it.
absolutely, I'm not disputing that one. What I'm disputing is what was turned around on me personally. That's what I'm disputing.
I'm just trying to understand this whole package. So all this yellow stuff, then you're in agreement that nobody's entitled to anything, none of these workers.
That's your words. I didn't say it.
You just, well, okay. So you're saying that all these people that are here in yellow,
That's the request.
that's the request for extra compensation.
Yes.
Please read me by name.
So are they
Sarah,
requesting it or is Karen requesting it on their behalf?
I am.
Should I answer?
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We've gone back and forth. So, I'm not directing it at you, Karen, so you gotta relax and sit down, or you can stay there, but I don't. Like you might, unless you want to be. So the Title 9-55A says that the compensation shall be reasonable. That's a requirement, that it be reasonable. And also says that the municipality shall pay all necessary expenses incurred by the registrars and. I mean, this is not a license to just make up arbitrary numbers, and no one's saying it's arbitrary. But quite frankly, I'm really kind of disappointed in the way that this has happened. And the fact that we have to go through this tonight. We had 2 resignations of registrars. And I'm not gonna say that the resignations were related to this issue, but I know for a fact that there was some arguments that occurred at the last,
I'm gonna call point of order. That has nothing to do with that, and that's confidential at all.
I am talking about publicly known information. And there were arguments out
In a
in,
public office.
there were arguments between the registrars and the finance director about this issue weeks ago. And they have continued for weeks, and now tonight we get 2 resignations of registrars. One of them has been registrar for 43 years.
No,
No,
I'm sorry,
Employee,
employee for 43 years. And how many years have you been a registrar?
5,
5 years, okay. And Angela's been a registrar for longer than that, I think.
10.
And 10 years. And the town's never had an issue with the registrars and compensation or any of this until we had a very bitter discussion. I'm gonna label it as bitter during our budget season, where the registrars came in for a request for money for early voting. And the discussions were not bitter about the board of selectmen asking questions about what's appropriate for the early voting budget. And we had good discussions about that. But then there was a lot of what I consider to be interpersonal stuff happening between the registrars and the finance director. And now tonight we have the finance director who has apparently decided on her own that she's not gonna pay the monies requested by the registrars for compensation. Even though we have budgeted this money, it's been approved. We had hourly rates that we approved for compensation. And now people are not being compensated based upon the request for compensation, because the finance director wants to say that these were 35-day hour, they get compensated $35 for conferences, and they're not hourly employees, and they're working on stipends. And I'm just totally disappointed that this is a public discussion over a bitter fight. It sounds like a power struggle between the registrars and the finance director. And it's like, who's in charge? The department heads or the finance director,
let me add some clarity there, because you're missing some key pieces of information, I think.
right?
Amy did find the submission submitted by Karen to be outside of the scope of what should be appropriate, and she brought it to me. I then met with the 2 registrars of voters and Amy, and we had a discussion. And in that conversation about an outcome, I gave Karen the opportunity to have this discussion at a Board of Selectmen's meeting, and I gave her the opportunity, because it's a personnel matter, have the conversation in executive session or open session, and she opted to have it in open session.
Understood.
So there's no personal animus that's going on here. It's Amy was doing her job as the fiduciary agent of the town. And we're settling this as the statute requires us to do. Now, you want to have a conversation about what is reasonable? Fair.
Well, okay, so that's why I'm hearing the back and forth tonight. I'm sitting here, and again, I'm sitting on 2 resignations that we voted on already. And I think what we could have done tonight is to say, hey, Board of Selectmen, here's a compensation schedule. We'd like you to vote on it. Instead of Karen having to defend what she did and defend the hours and having a confrontation with the finance director, why don't we just table this? Let's come back with a list of fee schedule for these people, because I thought we approved that already in the budget, or we approved it. Let's just vote on a fee schedule pursuant to the statute 9-55A and call it a day, rather than having a fight between people as to whether they should be compensated. Let's just do
This
our
is not a
job.
fight. I was asking for clarification. I'm asking for clarification
No.
because I don't understand it as being somebody that's gonna be compensated for something that I don't feel that I'm entitled to.
I'm not disputing.
And I'm not questioning that she's not entitled to more than what she
Right.
got, but as far as what we voted on for compensation, those hours from 9:30 to 6:30, those people have been compensated that worked accordingly. There's nobody that hasn't gotten compensated. This is a training issue. It has nothing to do with the compensation that people got paid. This is all related to training, except for her hours worked, but it's on this here, and that's why clarification, it says training.
But Marie, she's getting, she's, the proposal is that a registrar gets $200 something for like what should be about $1,100 of work. It's like, 36 hours of work. She's gonna get paid $200 something. Like she said, $5 an hour. I went through all the numbers. I looked at the spreadsheets. Why would the registrar get paid $5 an hour? Because the treasurer decides that that's a just compensation. We never approved $5 an hour for the registrar's compensation.
They're not getting paid only the rate that Amy has included. They're also getting paid their stipended amount, which they get whether they work or not. They're stipended employees.
JC, I thought that
on that
they've been,
day.
hold it. They've been getting, they've been always be getting an annual stipend, which has covered their work as the registrars in the office. They've always
Not on
gotten,
an hourly basis.
No.
not an hourly basis. They've always gotten paid for their time at the polls. You can't expect people that get paid.
That's not true.
I don't see how we did a fee schedule that included the registrar's fees during early voting, during time at the polls. That was not
We did that as part of the budget for the fiscal 25, which this does not cover.
fair enough. But if we're gonna say, listen, we think that they should get paid for being at the polls, in addition to their $17,000 a year stipend, then that's what we decided. But this year, because we decided that's the way it's gonna go, we're not gonna do it, and we're gonna hold her to $235 for $200 something for $1,100 worth of work.
That is why the conversation is here.
I get it. I think we should do 9-55A. Let's get us a fee schedule and let's vote on it, and then that would be our job. Rather than talking about the specifics of Karen's time and Amy's dispute and her saying it's a conference. How do you pay, if I could ask the finance director, how do you pay somebody $35 for a day of work?
That's what the state statute allows them for any training day.
That's the
If
only
there's
thing that
no-
the state
It
statute
pays for
requires them.
Conference.
One at a time, please. One at a time, please.
I'm sorry, it says in 955A that they get a reasonable compensation for their time.
So it's, I don't know, I have an OCR report that says, we're required to pay them $35 a day when they go to Broback training.
9-6.
Pay them, but also pay them the reasonable compensation.
And I did. So if you looked at your sheet in front of you.
Yeah.
She got paid $633, the regular stipend, and in the past, that has always counted election prep. The only additional time they ever got paid was for the actual elections in some cases. All the prep, all the setting up has always been part of their job that they get paid a stipend for every year.
Who said that? Where's that written?
That's been the past.
That's
That's
reasonable.
been the practice.
I think that what we should do, it's reasonable, hold on. I think it's reasonable to, I think Alan, you got a good point. I think it's reasonable to ask, how many hours are they typically working for that stipend, right? And to ask whether or not it's reasonable that to set up and take down that stipend. I'd like to know for $17,000 a year, are they working 1,000 hours? Are they working 200 hours? And is that set up and take down reasonable? I'd like to know that. I'm not saying, I don't know right now, sitting here, whether it's reasonable, because I don't know how many hours they work during the year in the regular job doing being a registrar, aside from what they do at the polling places. All I know is that they submitted for the polling places, there's a dispute, but to pay $35, because I think the statute says you're supposed to pay them $35, but that doesn't say, does it say, but they don't get any other compensation?
No, in addition to their stipend. So they're stipend employees, they get X dollars whether they work 0 hours or whether they work 50. Every single 2 weeks.
The salaried employees get comp time? When
In
they
some
come,
cases,
when they come to meetings like tonight, and
it
they're
depends
salaried.
what the contract says.
It depends on the contract.
Yeah.
So salaried employees that are expected to get paid for 40 hours a week get additional pay,
May get additional.
may get additional pay depending on their contracts, right?
Yeah.
Should we be looking at all the salaried employees that are getting comp time for coming to these meetings, for example? And asking the question, should that be included in their regular salaries? Or should they get compensated additional time to come to a meeting like tonight and to make a presentation? What, am I supposed to, be as a selectman, decide whether that's fair or not? So,
That's part of their contract.
so
They're
why,
union employees.
so why is it that somebody makes a determination that because they're stipend employees, that their work at the polls has to be included, at least some of the work has to be included in the stipend? Why wouldn't I make a determination that a salaried employee is expected to come to meetings at night to do their job without additional compensation? Why wouldn't I assume that?
Would that be true for all stipend employees then?
Maybe we need a policy about stipend employees. Let's do that. You know, we're talking about equity here, and I think this whole thing is really bothersome to me. We're having a public discussion over whether or not a person should be paid fair and reasonable compensation for their work.
By their choice. Right? Public discussion, as was said by the first selectman, was by their choice.
They're in charge. They're the head of the department.
No, he's saying the discussion is happening in public because of their choice.
That's true. I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
Jason?
Sarah,
I guess what I would like is some additional information. Number one, like the hours that these individuals worked. What I have an issue with is that we're speaking for other people, and I don't know if they feel they deserve more compensation or if they really did the training outside of the hours that they worked, or did they get it while they were already on the clock? So personally, instead of seeing like the number of hours on here, I would like the hours that they did the work and the training if they were at the same time. And each individual consulted if they feel they weren't paid adequately. That's what I would like to see.
so,
That should be in your packet.
so.
It's in my packet, but it's just based on number of hours and I don't know.
So in the next 3 weeks, can you or your staff please reach out to those employees listed? And can you also do a 2-year look back on the timesheet submitted by the registrars of voters to get an aggregation of the hours worked over 2 years? Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I would just like to say it's not clear, and I think this is what Sarah was going to, it's not clear that this training took place outside of the time period that they were already being paid. So I want to know that, and I think we need to know that on a person by person basis, right?
That's
then-
what we're gonna,
And then any timesheet that isn't correct needs to be correct.
Yeah, because if they do deserve additional compensation and it wasn't accounted for, I think we should know that accurately before we make our decision.
good point.
Can I just clarify, everybody got paid for early voting?
Yes,
Everybody that worked a poll got paid the stipend that you guys agreed on for next year, this year. So everybody, the registrars, the moderators, all the people that worked, got paid exactly what you guys voted on for next year's budget. For all their early voting days.
Amy is referring to working at the polls. This is for the training and preparation. They're two different things. Yes, they got paid for working at the polls. The question is, we have two, well, they're actually the new registrars now, but they were the deputies. They each worked 14.5 hours and they should be paid $453. And that's being held up on them because of this dispute.
You're the registrar.
Thanks for that. I haven't seen those timesheets. I never signed a timesheet. I know that I had to go in because of an illness of our registrar to fill in. And Karen did train me on the CVRS system during her work hours, the days before.
I was there for part of that.
It might have been Tuesday morning. I don't remember the days
No,
anymore.
it's March 21st, 25th, 26th, 27th.
But,
27th, yeah.
but I worked in, Angelo's stead, those days, so. I don't know what I'm waiting for money, but I know that I did not get any additional. I did not see any early voting people getting additional training. Except for the 9:30 to 6:30. That's my recollection, but I don't know what those sheets say. So I'm at a loss, I can't say.
Sarah?
So an individual comes into work like this, do they not fill out, they don't sign a timesheet of any kind, so.
No,
Because they used to get paid for the day.
Right, so maybe that's something we should look at also, just to have accurate hours. I don't know, cause I'm just having difficulty that is this put together by Karen with the number of hours?
Yes.
Okay.
So as a registrar, it's gonna be tomorrow. I would welcome something like that and would certainly do that. I don't have a problem with giving the, workers something that they sign saying they worked X amount of hours. That's easy enough to do. That might end some of the confusion, I think.
Any other comments? So I'd ask for a motion to postpone this item until the June 6th meeting.
So move.
There a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll take it up again in 3 weeks. Amy, you've got your homework, right?
Yes.
All right. Barbara. Amy, are you planning on hanging around for the ARPA track discussion? No. Then let's try and get you out of here. Can we take that agenda item out of order, please?
Motion. Go ahead.
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so on May 3rd of last year, the Board of Selectmen made allocations or appropriations for the balance of our American Rescue Plan Act dollars. One of those decisions was to fund $120,000 for the engineering of the replacement of the high school track. Through conversations we've had with school administration and with town staff and with third-party vendors, there is no need to engineer the track. It's basically, you're gonna replace the existing surface. There's no engineering component to that. Because this is federal dollars and we went through the appropriation process of Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, town meeting. The concern is that we should decommit that and clarify what the purpose is. So there is still some discussions to be had on the end product, but just because of the deadlines that are required by the American Rescue Plan Act in terms of committing dollars by the end of calendar 24, I want to start the process of deauthorizing the $120,000 in ARPA funds for the engineering of the track. The next step would be the Board of Finance in June, followed by a town meeting, and then we can work on the reappropriation process then. But I don't want to get jammed up by the calendar and end up having to turn back federal money. That is a no-no.
I think is the money sitting in special, is it part of the fund balance that's designated fund balance?
It's in CNR, right?
no, it's in a grant.
It's in the grant.
ARPA was a grant.
So it's-
And each project is budgeted, and in that grant, you have budgets amongst every line that we gave the money to.
So we have a separate, it's not in fund
Line.
balance, it's not in the regular budget, it's a separate grant
Fund,
fund.
Yep.
And the money that, this allocation for this high school engineering, that was part of the vote, I think you said, like the
Yeah.
town meeting.
Yeah.
Was it specifically designated at the town meeting for the engineering?
yes,
Engineering of the track specifically, and that's why we need to correct it.
So you need a vote to, why don't we just do a regular vote to send it to town meeting, and at the town meeting, have them vote to replace it. Instead of us doing something to replace it and we then decommission it, why don't we just send it to the town meeting and ask them as part of that vote to decommission it and reallocate it to the new line item?
We need to figure out what the new line item is. That involves a conversation. So
Right,
I'm not there yet.
okay,
Um,
but we don't have.
I got a process. I just want to follow the process
Right.
so that we are keeping the train running.
Okay,
So the motion that I would request would be to deauthorize $120,000 in American Rescue Plan Act dollars for the engineering of the high school track. Forward that to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance in town.
Make a motion to deauthorize the $120,000 of ARPA money that we appropriated concerning the high school track engineering.
Second,
Discussion.
think maybe I would propose to amend the motion to include the words because those funds or that project or that purpose is no longer needed. With the record of why.
Accept that as a friendly amendment. Sure.
Yes.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Easy enough. Good night, Mrs. O'Toole.
Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of guests with us tonight, going back to the normal call of the agenda. Discuss automated traffic enforcement systems. So I'll set the table here and say a month and a half ago, Adam Selena, who has represented the town in the General Assembly on a number of different projects, approached Chief Carl and I about a change in state law that happened in January of 23 pertaining to the implementation of automatic traffic enforcement systems. Adam introduced us to Andrew Noble, who is kind of an emerging leader in the industry. And I'm going to ask Andrew to give a presentation and then invite some comments from Chief Carl and his team. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I think you have a presentation as well. You'll be on the screen, Mr. Bowser. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Noble. I'm the founder and president of a company called SiteStream. We're based in neighboring Massachusetts. And it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. To set some level of context, I've been in the photo enforcement industry now for almost 19 years. August will be my 19th anniversary in what's colloquially known as speed cameras and red light running cameras, an emotive topic for some. But tonight's presentation is meant to be an educational presentation, not on my company and our products and services, but on photo enforcement generally, and to help educate you on the state of Connecticut and what it's been doing over the last year. Does this work? I can't advance the slide for some reason. It's on slide mode. It's flashing, but not.
It's showing. I can steer if you want.
That'd be great. Thank you, steer. That'd be great. Thank you. I hate being here saying next slide, please. But here we are. Next slide. So in last summer, the governor signed the legislation into place to allow for Connecticut to have automated photo enforcement for the first time. And included in a Vision Zero Council recommendation. That legislation couldn't be put into practice by communities that were interested until the DOT had published guidelines at the beginning of this year. And on time, the DOT did publish those guidelines, and I'll be talking about those in a moment. In passing the legislation, Connecticut joined 26 other states around the country which advocate and legislate for one form of photo enforcement or another. Typically, these are red light cameras or speed cameras. In some states, they are both red light and speed cameras. In Connecticut, joined those 26 states, predominantly in the Midwest and down the eastern seaboard. Other states, they may not have legislation, they're home rule states. And in those cases, it's local cities set their own ordinance and have a home rule under the jurisdiction of running a program. The reason for this, and in part why Connecticut put these into place, was because speeding and motor deaths are the leading cause, one of the leading causes of people under the age of 30 in this country. We all see the statistics in our daily news. If you think back to when you first started driving your car, you knew when it was doing 60 or 70 miles an hour because it probably rattled and made a lot of noise. But cars these days are designed to insulate us from the world around us. They're quiet, they're smooth. And that same corner that you can drive around these days at 50 or 60 miles an hour, 20 years ago, you couldn't even do it at 30 miles an hour. Not because the corner is any different, but because your car insulates you and is a far higher quality than that of 20 years ago. Add to that distracted driving, text messages popping up on your dashboard, and you can see why the statistics are as horrifying as they are. Next slide, please, Jason. Thank you. When we think of enforcement typically for driving in a manner in which you shouldn't be doing so, we often think of a police officer. The police officer, he or she pulls you over typically in their vehicle. They see you do something you shouldn't be doing. You might see them holding a handheld laser or radar system such as this. But the evolution of photo enforcement doesn't take the law enforcement out of the process at all. Quite the contrary. Not a civil violation for speeding or red light enforcement in this country can go out unless a law enforcement officer in the community where the camera is based has actually looked at that evidence, reviewed it, and made the attestation that yes, that could go out as a civil violation. So law enforcement is as ingrained in the process of photo enforcement as it was before photo enforcement came about. This particular camera here evolved even further. So this laser gun evolved even further by having a camera attached to it. So modern photo enforcement allows a police officer to stand at the side of the road, use a product such as this, but rather than chasing that driver down, the photographs are uploaded to a company such as myself, which then starts the process off for photo enforcement. Some communities around the country take these cameras and they put them in a mobile environment. So you have a tripod typically situated at a temporary location at the side of the road, and detection technology inside that unit sees cars receding, approaching, speeding, and takes a photograph of that vehicle. Sometimes they're trailer mounted. This is actually in Maryland, where you see a lot of trailer mounted speed cameras in certain counties. And by having a mobile environment, a more portable environment, it allows in certain communities to answer those questions for residents that say there's a lot of drag racing on my street this week. So these semi-permanent locations are meant to be working autonomously, and they can be moved from location to location and be completely unmanned. This particular unit has also some CCTV surveillance on it at the same time. The further step from that is actually what they call fixed photo enforcement units, where you put fixed installations in the street for either red light or speed enforcement. And those fixed installations automatically take the images of the speeding cars or the red light runners or whatever they're meant to be doing, and they pass them to the violations processing center and the community in general. Now, here in Connecticut, the legislation decided to take two specific flavors of photo enforcement, and that's just fixed speed and fixed red light. So the legislation, as governed through the guidelines published in January, talks about just those two flavors of enforcement. So not handheld photo enforcement with the police officers, not mobile enforcement with the trailers. These are fixed post installations only. And this 14-page document laid out by the DOT guidelines is to inform, educate, and empower communities to put photo enforcement into place by following strategic and specific instructions. The first of those is a justification report. No community can put in a photo enforcement program unless that location and the enforcement methodology has been approved by the DOT itself. So part of the methodology here is that communities have to come up with justification reports about why they want a camera in that specific location. The DOT wants specific attributes in that report: crash data, annualized average daily traffic counts, road topography, outline drawings, schematics, anecdotal evidence of why something needs to be put into place to make that community a safer location. And as part of that justification, the DOT has 60 days to decide whether or not you can put a camera into place. What we do, and other companies in this arena, is we help you navigate that. So we look at the 3-year crash history of a particular community. Next slide, please, Jason. We look at the crash statistics you have. We get very granular. This is your own community, and your crash statistics over the last 3 years are published in 2023. And we try to determine which crashes were as a result of speed or red light infringements, for example. And so which of those crashes or those hotspots could be adjusted and improved for increased driver safety and pedestrian safety by the employment and deployment of a photo enforcement solution. Next slide, please, Justin. Now, the state is conscious of equity for all. And so it is decided that if there are areas of the community within Connecticut that have what's called qualified census tracts, you can have no more than 2 enforcement cameras in that. Now, East Windsor doesn't have any qualified census tracts, but some communities do. And so those communities cannot just put cameras everywhere. They're limited to 2 per zone. And if a community shares a qualified census tract with its neighboring community, those 2 communities have to come up with an intra-community agreement to decide which cameras go in that location, all encompassed with the DOT support and efforts as well. Now, regardless of whether you have a speed camera or a red light running camera, there is typically a 10-step process for all these enforcement technologies, regardless of the community. And the first is that camera triggers automatically at step number 1 on something someone shouldn't be doing. So here in Connecticut, if we're talking about speed cameras, for example, the DOT states that anyone driving at 10 miles an hour above the speed limit or more is able to get a ticket. So that camera is programmed to only take pictures of people driving 10 miles an hour more. So it's not taking pictures and videos of everybody driving past. It's just those that are exceeding the speed limit by 10 miles an hour or more. The images typically are uploaded automatically to the violations processing center of the vendor you've chosen in step number 2 and 3. That data center then sorts through the violation images from that day, and it's people within that vendor that typically look at the violation images to make sure it's a real violation. If it's a red light camera, we have videos to show the lights changing sequentially from green to yellow to red, and here's the car going through the intersection. And we're able to look at that subjective video and to make sure it's a real red light violation. If you have 40 or 50 cars going through the red light as part of a funeral procession, well, that changes things. That gives you, the video gives you some context. That sort of violation. Those 50 cars don't get red light running tickets. If you're looking at a speed violation, well, video doesn't help you. If I show you a video of a car doing 40 or a car doing 50, there's no value to that. So typically speed cameras don't have video. We're just looking at still images. Either you were speeding above the trigger threshold or you won't. So at that stage, number 4, we're verifying it's a real violation. And at that point, typically the vendor would look at the local DMV they have a connection to see who owns that car with the license plate ABC123. The response comes back saying ABC123 belongs to John Smith at 123 Main Street, and it's a red Ford Explorer. If the photographs show it's a red Ford Explorer, it's a vehicle match. So the business rules and enforcement rules are met. This should now go out as a civil violation. But it's not the vendor that makes that decision. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's the police department. So the police department log into the same software that we've been using, and they see those pre-packaged evidence packets put together. They look at the photographs, the video, they are able to corroborate that the name and address look real. It doesn't say Mickey Mouse at Disneyville. It's a real address in a real town and a real name. They're able to see it's a vehicle make, model, color match with the photograph. And they make the determination at that point, yes, send a notice, or no, don't send it. If they say don't send it, the whole thing dies right there. The data's kept for some reporting purposes, but the images aren't used, and the whole violation goes away. The police officer in question, he or she makes a determination why they don't want it to be sent out, because we need to have that for reporting purposes on the back of the program, especially for freedom of information requests. If they decide that they want the notice to go out, they say yes. At that point, it goes into a print queue at the vendor typically, and it goes into the United States mail, typically the next business day, and goes to someone's house, wherever the registered owner address is. Once somebody gets a ticket in the mail, they're given some options. And the first thing they're given is typically an invitation to go to a website, usually hosted by the vendor, where they get to see their own images, their own videos, and they're typically asked to make one of 3 decisions. Do you want to pay the ticket? Do you want to contest the ticket? Or do you want to transfer the liability to anybody else? So typically, if a police officer pulls you over the side of the street, it was you driving the car. But if it's a camera witnessing your car doing something it shouldn't have been doing, we don't know who was driving. The assumption is it's the registered owner vehicle, much like a parking ticket. It's the car that gets the ticket in a parking ticket, much the same as a speed violation. But this is your chance as a registered vehicle owner to contest it and say, my brother Jimmy was driving my car that day. Well, so typically, as the state law allows, you tell us where Jimmy lives, and then the vendor will send Jimmy the ticket, and then Jimmy has a choice to pay it or contest it, and you go around in a circle like that. And typically, the vendors will collect the money on the behalf of the community, and then pass that money to the community with reporting on the back end. So this 10-step process is the same regardless of how that camera is located. And across the US, almost exclusively, apart from Washington, DC, and 1 or 2 very small communities, it's the vendor that pays for everything. These are 0 city capital investments, 0 operational costs for the city. And it's the fine revenue generated by the program that funds the operation of the original capital investment. And so for the city, it's a revenue stream and improved driver behavior. Now in Connecticut, the fine is set in 1 of 2 ways. If it's your first violation, it's a $50 fine, regardless of whether you're doing 15 over the speed limit or 45 over the speed limit, it's $50 for your first violation. State legislation provides that your second and subsequent violations are $75 in the community, again, regardless of the speed you're doing. So that's how it works here in the state of Connecticut. Now, when we think of cameras, we think about literally snapping a photograph. In fact, the camera is only part of it. You need a trigger to tell the camera when to take a photograph of somebody. So regardless of the vendor you choose, they either have a radar-based or a laser-based detecting system. And it's that detection system that's able to see vehicles, if you like, in an electronic manner, and determine who was breaking the law and whatever they're doing. Now, just here in Connecticut, it's just speed or red light. In other states, it could be detecting illegal U-turns or stopping at the side of a road where you're not allowed to drop or pick up passengers. But typically, these are far higher value cameras than you would buy in Best Buy or found on your cell phone. And the cameras work autonomously. They're powered typically either by solar power or by the local power supply of the local pole. And they're offloading their images through a cellular device to the violations processing center. Now, the heart and soul of the whole program is more than just the camera, it's the software. It's that workflow software that helps you take those images, connect them to the local DMV to see who owns the vehicle, and it allows you on the back end of that to have the citations to go out, to have the reporting to the system, and in some states we have to connect to the databases of the court to organize the court contested tickets. Next, please, Jason. Now, the state legislation and the guidelines dictate for the very most part how a program can operate, but communities are allowed some latitude to make some decisions for themselves. And so the workflow software is usually tailor-made to the community, and most vendors will come and talk to a community about how they'll allow some latitude and walk you through the decisions to make so you have an informed process start. So the workflow for every program is typically a little bit different within the community. Each reporting system is important because the state of Connecticut states each year after a camera's been in place, you have to give a report to the DOT about the performance of that camera and improve safety in the town. So dashboards, statistics, attributes of reporting are extremely important. And every 3 years, the DOT asks you to re-justify that camera being in the location and being able to remain so. Well, typically, you'll find if you had the justification given 3 years ago to put the camera into place in the first place to improve safety, you would like to think you've been able to improve the safety over that 3-year period. So the re-justification, in theory, should be an easier process. Sadly, you don't see violations go down to zero. Whilst there is always an improvement of driver behavior, typically between 30 and 40% after about 4 to 6 months of a program, they never go to zero, regardless if it's red light or speed. Now, citations are the final product output, if you like. The notices of violation that people receive to their house, and this is an example one. And these citations are civil infractions. No points are assessed to your driving license around the country. There's no impact on your insurance. They're literally a parking ticket for a moving violation. And so the citations invite you to go to the website. Next slide, please, Jason. You see the photographs of your car. You see your personal information. There's usually language on the front and back about the ordinance or the law you've broken that you're receiving this in the first place for. And typically on the back of it, you'll find your options and what you can do now. Next slide, please, Jason. Colors vary around the country. Some states mandate that the citation looks like a uniform traffic citation. Other states, it's do what you please as long as you contain the pertinent information, which is the case in Connecticut. Next slide, please. Now, when you get that citation, you're typically, as I said, invited to a website. You put your ticket number in, the PIN number that's on the top of the citation, and you get to see your own video and your own still images. You know, they say a picture paints 1,000 words, but if you're looking at a video of your car going through a red light intersection, it's hard to argue against that evidence when you see the light changing sequentially from green to yellow to red.
This doesn't go through the CIP though.
No. It's just an example of paying portal. It happened to be Connecticut when I pulled it up, so it's not our fault. Now, regardless of how well the notices are designed and the colors and the language, and regardless of how well the public information campaign is being done beforehand and the signage and the community that's needed before you have cameras in place as per state guidelines, some people get a ticket and they just want to talk about it. So most vendors have a customer call center where you can phone up and talk about your ticket. go through your options. The job of the vendor is not to dissuade or persuade you to pay it, contest or transfer, just hope you walk through the same options that you could have read on the website yourself or on the back of the notice. But in the world of scams in the mail or on your cell phones, you can appreciate why people sometimes just want to have a conversation. Typically calls are recorded, as they say, for quality and training purposes. And typically these call centers are multilingual. But yeah, it's the same options giving at the call center. If you want to pay by phone, you can do so. The benefits coming down to the end of the presentation now are essentially improved driver behavior. And this is why the state of Connecticut has put this into place in the first place. It's allowed and empowered communities to start a program to improve driver behavior. And as I said before, depending on the program and what it's trying to do, you typically get a reduction by about 30 to 40% and about 4 to 6 months of the program going forwards. Zero costs for the community, aside from the approval or rejection of violations by the police department and their time in that. It's 24/7 enforcement, so these cameras are working all the time. If it's a school zone speed camera, typically it's only working 180 school days of the year, unless there's summer school. And cameras can typically be changed to have different speed enforcements during the day. If the school gets out, the speed limit increases, you can change the camera to work at a different manner and different speed limits. And state allows you to use the revenue streams in Connecticut to your choice, as long as it's marked for public safety and community efforts in one way or the other. And the metrics of the reporting from the system are all important, not only for your own volition and your own concept of why you're doing this, but of course for the state and its blessings going afterwards. And essentially, that's the quick presentation of photo enforcement in America and Connecticut. I'm very happy to answer and expand any questions and expand on any points I've made.
So we're going to take you up on that, I think, but first I'm going to turn to Chief Carl and his team if they have anything that they want to add. Chief, anything from you?
Sure.
You're not going to man a few words, I think.
I don't know about that. So, talk back to follow. So as you mentioned before, about a month and a half, we met and Deputy Chief and I listened to Mr. Noble's speech, which is very thorough and very fantastic work program. And I can imagine it left me feeling a certain way, and I imagine that it's leaving it here feeling a certain way, right? So, having been part of law enforcement and motor vehicle stops for almost 3 decades, in a motor vehicle stop, there's the human side of it, right? There's the human contact. There's the investigative effort to determine what violation there was, what's going on inside the car, outside of all this. And then there's the discretion, which is the police officer's greatest tool, right? The discretion. So feeling a certain way about that and wondering how this would move forward, you know, doing with due diligence, you know, trust but verify, right? Trust but verify. Contacted local chiefs of police, colleagues, spoke very heavily with my deputy chief, who's also got a lot of experience, and what local communities are doing. So, looking at anything and trying to make a decision, I was weighing out the pros and cons, right? So if there's bias in anything, the only way, there's bias in everything we do, but the only way you can do that is transparency. You need transparency in what was going on. So, in that trust but verify, I talked to some of the communities and looked at some of what's happening around the country. And I listed some pros and cons that I want to say, and then I'll give you my final opinion. Do you like it or not? I'll give you my opinion. So things like this have led to public backlash, right? So some members of the community may perceive that the fixed radar systems primarily are revenue generating rather than efforts to improve the safety, right? There's also legal challenges, although Connecticut general statutes have handled some of that. There's accuracy, calibration, and adherence to due process. Negative impact on local businesses, but again, Connecticut general statutes have considerations in there about where you can put these cameras. Same thing with inequitable enforcement, which Mr. Noble put in his presentation. Cost, resources allocation, but that's already been addressed in the presentation. There's not any to the community. And there's the reduced officer discretion, which I talked about. And there's also impact of driver behavior. Some of the impacted driver behavior not considered is that some people will come up on that and there might be some sudden braking or unsafe driving to get around it. That's some of the evidence that you see, and then there's some privacy concerns. That being said, I put that first because I want to talk about the pros. Some of the benefits to what we see here. Some of the pros that we put there is improving road safety. So the presence of speed cameras serves as a deterrent to speeding, ultimately leading to safer conditions, both drivers and the pedestrians. And the enforcement reduces the likelihood of accidents and fatalities, not a question. It's calming of traffic. Revenue generating, yes, tickets issued to speeders can generate revenue for the community, which can be reinvested in various initiatives like road maintenance, infrastructure, public safety programs.
Which is different from tickets now.
Right, it's different from tickets now. Typically, you get a ticket and it doesn't come back to the community in that form. So there's a resource allocation. When I mean resource allocation, we are a community that has a certain amount of police officers on duty. Sometimes we don't have enough, sometimes we have too many, and there's no way to predict that. Certainly, we cannot be all over all the roads all the time. So this is an absolute force multiplier. It's 24 hours a day, it's a force multiplier. There's consistent enforcement, public awareness and education. The presence of the cameras raises awareness about the importance of obeying speed and promote a culture of safe driving. And also, finally, there's data collection. And the data collection is traffic patterns, speeding trends, high-risk areas. And that information can be used to inform us on road safety initiatives and infrastructure planning and efforts. So that being said, the last piece of this is the transparency that I see is the community, right? What's the community's take on all this? Because it leaves you feeling a certain way. It's almost a civil process versus what we know, what law enforcement knows. I will tell you this. East Windsor's biggest complaint, you guys have heard this before, on a daily basis is traffic. We have locations in town where one in particular that I can think of. Several months ago, we put a speed trailer out and it stays out for 11, 14, 21 days. And it gives us fantastic data. How many traffic violations there are, what the speed is at 50%, 85%, high, lows, and how many cars go through there. We then follow up with law enforcement initiatives for motor vehicle stops. Before I took over the chief of police, we worked on a lot of motor vehicle stops. Our motor vehicle stops right now, sometimes in a shift will exceed 50, 56 motor vehicle stops. That's with the addition of our on-duty officers and our distracted driver or rural roads enforcement. Speed is a consideration that needs to be addressed in East Windsor. There's not enough time to be on all the roads. And so the location I just described where there was a speed trailer out for a while, we left, we followed up with enforcement, and 2 weeks later, we were getting those complaints again because we're just not there, right? And so we go back out with our trailer, and there's a list of locations for our trailer or our data devices. We have about 3. We're in the process of trying to get some more because we're hoping that does address some of the issues that we have. We just don't have enough of them. There's a list of locations that we won't get to all summer long to put them out there. And so we apply for grants and we do what we can. But like I said, we do a lot more motor vehicle stops than we ever had. And we are not shaping the behavior the way I would like to see. Now, are our fatal motor vehicle crashes down? Hard to say. We had one last year. It's hard to say coming into the summer months. So if you're asking my opinion and my recommendation, I think that this is an initiative worthy to go forward through the democratic process. That would be an ordinance, a town meeting, and getting that, what does the local community think for the transparency side of what we want to do for the initiative? So we have started to work with those communities to look at it, an ordinance, just in the event that this would move forward, to be able to present what the law enforcement thinks the ordinance should look like, and obviously that would go to you guys, and then it would avail itself of the democratic process moving forward. That's my opinion. It's worthy of that. I'm here tonight to answer any questions, and also offline if anybody's wants to have a discussion with myself and my deputy chief about anything we discussed tonight.
Deputy Murphy, Sergeant Knowles, anything to add?
I'll just second the fact, sir, that, being one of the more, as a deputy chief, being a repository often for complaints. Like Chief Carl said, there's now probably 2 days that go by that I don't get a request for speed enforcement or complaint of there's, people are going in excess of the stop sign. Once then we reallocate that patrol, people like starting those and the troops go out there and the rest of us. So this is kind of further what the chief said. That is certainly, you could say having traffic only issues in your town. That's a good problem. You're gonna have a problem, but then again, it's not a big problem until somebody gets seriously hurt or killed. And so what do we do? It's predictable and preventable. This is the means to stop the ends, and it's something we'll certainly explore and see if we can do that and see how we can. 27 square miles, sometimes 3 officers, 4 officers on patrol. This is the force multiplier for us as well. And again, it's not arbitrary, the opportunity to actually put the process in place where you can't appeal it and say your speech and still have an officer look at it. It's an automatic, you're in, you're done. So we're not gonna put that, we don't go through these swings, but also, hey, maybe I should slow down on, I don't know, Newbury Road where everybody knows that's not a community concept. So just, I think it's a good opportunity and there's certainly tangible benefits as well.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so for either Mr. Noble or Chief Carl, any questions or comments from the board? Sarah, you got
I have a whole list. Mr. Noble, did I hear you correctly when you said the lag time from when the photo is taken till it typically goes in the mail to the registered owner of the vehicle is 1 business day, or no?
No,
Did I
I'm
hear
saying
that
that
incorrectly?
when the citation, the notice of violation is approved by the police department, it's typically mailed the next day.
So we
The
would,
time between a violation being seen by the camera and getting to the police department can vary on the volume being seen by the vendor, but typically, I can only speak for my own self and our company. We typically try and work on a 2 to 3 day lag time. So typically, chief and team are looking at the violations that are 2 or 3 days old. They're making an approval on a daily basis. It's not burdensome from them because we've already done the burden work before that. And the citation goes in the mail the next day. For us, being in Massachusetts, the mail float time is 1 day. So if you go past a speeding cam on a Monday, it's likely to be in your mailbox on the Friday, Thursday or Friday.
I guess my biggest concern is adding another burden to the police department when we're sometimes already short-staffed, and now this is another item on their list. And I don't know if we would need additional resources at the police department to take this on.
I would doubt not, if I can just talk to that chief. That typically it takes around about, for the police department to look at the evidence packet we put together, assuming it's a speed violation where it's just photographs and the metadata. They're more or less looking at the name and address to make sure it looks real and the vehicle make model matches from the DMV is matching the photograph. That process with giving it a great deal of time is around about 15 to 20 seconds. Which is longer than I've been speaking and answering this question here. So it's a lot of due process to give each one of those violations. So in a community like this, because you don't have an interstate going through town, you're not talking about 1,500 violations. Well, I'm into the middle of town necessarily, but the violations themselves, I wouldn't think would be burdensome to the town.
Chief, is that your perspective as well?
So I would have to say that, that it depends on how many violations we got. Without knowing how many violations would generate into specific locations that would be approved by us, I would have to say that the 10 to 15 seconds, I'm not sure we have union workers. So I mean, we have to talk about the fact that we're slower than most private citizens that work harder. So
25-year union officer.
in president most of those years, grievance filed. So with some levity and some joke, I don't know per se, but I do know that there will be factors in there to say, okay, were there mitigating circumstances? Like, was it a person going to a fire call or things like that? So there might be things that would take a little bit longer, but typically a lot of the work is done to look at that. Now, with our agency, we have a on-duty sergeant and 2 or 3 officers that may on to maybe more. It depends on, we would have to probably put something in place to make sure that we would reach those. Because I understand your concern that you would want the ticket in the mail like as soon as possible. It's something not lagging, 14, 30, 21 days later. Right. Especially if you're going through the same area and you're just generating tickets over and over again. So we would have to set up something to that, but would it be overly burdensome? Would I be asking for another, police officer for this? I don't anticipate that, but I'm wondering if some of the revenue can come back to the department to mitigate that.
Would this be an appropriate assignment for somebody who's on a light duty assignment?
Absolutely. Any one of our certified police officers that would be able to take a look at that could determine that.
So just to tack on to that, so we don't have to go back to it, but, so, say you put it on North Road and I think you get like 27,000 trips a day
Yeah.
on North Road. And so you could get 150 violations, right? How long does that take? And does that create a resource load for you that you got to address?
Well, I think we could mitigate that. It depends on, like I said, there's a difference between 150 tickets and 1,000 tickets, then it would look at that. I'd have to do a little bit more research on that. But if his research is 10 to 15 seconds and it's typically a lot of the work is done, he's absolutely right. If we had to sit down at a collect terminal and run the car and make sure that, then I would tell you that, no, that was going to be much longer. But typically, if you're looking at that, I would have to, on a daily basis, have somebody log into their system if I have it right. Forgive me if I don't know, log into their system and make it part of our daily routine. And it could be a supervisor, an on-duty supervisor adding to their daily tasks. I mean, we can be a busy police department, but like I said, we're not overburdened. We have excellent officers that are very efficient. All kidding aside with union workers. You guys don't like my humor, sort of. But I think we can handle it.
Can I ask also a related question? And excuse me if I didn't hear this in your presentation, but I know you spoke to it previously. We can't just put these anywhere we want. There needs to be, there's a process by which the locations would have to be determined. Can you talk to that for a moment?
Yeah, so the justification reports are necessary to determine where the cameras go. So you already know within the community, the residents, the police department, the elected officials, where you think cameras will be most warranted. You've been living here, you see the crashes, you know where it's dangerous to get out of an intersection, you know where you think you want them. So it's part of a role of the vendor to help you collect that empirical data, to do some further analysis, to help you create the justification reports for the state. And it's the DOT will look at the justification reports, which contain an awful lot of attributes, to say, yes, go forward, and you can put a camera into place. So you just can't put them anywhere you like. They have to be done in concert with the DOT, which has 60 days to approve or dismiss your justification for a camera in that particular location.
And is there a distinction that DOT makes between placing them on state roads versus local roads?
No, not at all.
Sure, I think good.
Is there signage indicating that this camera is present to warn drivers?
Yeah, actually, one of the final pages of the justification report talks to not only the need for signage, but actually lays out specifically where the signs should be located, how large they should be, and it depicts the image on the sign and the language used on the sign. So it's pretty a uniform photo enforcement sign, but yeah, they're across the community.
Are there other towns in the state that you know of that are implementing this or have implemented already? And are we waiting on any unknown information from the state if we were to go forward?
No, this is new legislation from last summer, and it could not be enacted until the guidelines came out on January the 2nd. So this is very new legislation. The state essentially underwrites a community's ability to go forward. So they've got your back, if you like, because they put the legislation in the first place, as long as you follow the guidelines. So in answer to the question, no community has yet got a program running. It's only been 3 or 4 months now, but there's a lot of interest across the state. The Connecticut Chiefs of Police Association is endorsing this. The DOT, which we have a close alliance with, really endorses this. I think a lot of communities have been looking at the legislation that's almost passed in previous years, and now that it has, I think you'll see a lot of activity fairly quickly amongst a lot of communities, not just the big metropolis type cities you see on the coast, but across the state, smaller communities with a lot of traffic going through them with a bigger known problem.
So far, Hampton, Weathersfield, Enfield have had conversations about it or are taking steps to implement it. Are there others that I missed?
Middletown.
Yeah, West Hartford too. So you said West Hartford, yes.
There's quite a few coming.
Hampton.
I can tell you who
Hampton is?
They're looking at it very closely.
I can tell you who we, in those other communities that we reach out to in that conversation.
And their first selectman's a former police officer. And probably probably voted against the legislation, I would guess.
I'm not sure. I don't agree.
And then I would be interested in knowing like what the criteria is for spending the revenue and when we would actually be receiving the money. Is it quarterly, monthly, yearly?
Typically, it depends on the vendor you choose, but the way we do it is we collect the money continuously and we give it to the community every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So every 2 weeks on or around the 1st and the 15th of the month, we send the money to your designated account. And there's reporting around that, which we communicate with the community beforehand, with the elected officials and also with the Treasury Department. So,
And are there restrictions on what that could be used for?
yeah, you can't be building new tennis courts with the money from the camera, but you can be using it for public safety needs and road improvements within your community. And so it's fairly wide around that. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that in my research that I would, if I had any say at all, and like I said, this needs to go to the community, and I believe it's worthy of that. Is that there needs to be a greater education on our younger drivers, right? Our 16, 17, 18-year-old drivers in the high school. Maybe this could fund a program where we could have folks come in. A few years ago, we used to, if you remember Officer Stepien, she used to every single year go down with a simulator, and the new drivers, they would set it up in the gym, and the new drivers would go through the simulation training. We haven't done that in a few years, but that was pretty popular program. And, you know, whether it shaped the driving behavior, there's education that I think that, you know, that we could provide to give back to the community, and that would be one of the recommendations that I would make.
If I can raise 2 more points actually in answer to one of your questions. So typically for part-time firefighters, their license plates are put into the system ahead of time. So the processing staff at the vendor are flagged that it's a part-time firefighter. It doesn't mean it's rejected. It means it's put through to the police department for review, but that flag is on your screen to raise your awareness. You can't know everyone's car. And secondly, in terms of the local population getting tickets, it's typically very, very small indeed. A few reasons. Public information campaigns are run within the community by the vendor. You have signage and you see those all the time. And for the first 30 days of a program, it's a warning period. So citations are going out in the normal course of business, but with $0 fines. So local people, if they're getting tickets at all, it's typically during the warning period. So in the past, the experience shows that about 1 or 2% of most of violations that go out are to local people within the community.
And most of them are passers-by.
Passes, people who don't live in your community passing by community. And violations typically go up in the summer as people migrate for their very great vacations to your community. The weather's a lot better for longer, and they go down typically in the wintertime because it's darker, more icy on the road. So you see that sinusoidal pattern of behavior, but it never goes to 0.
Just 2 more questions. Who determines the appeals process? Is that something this board determines, or did the state already have something, or how does that work?
So I would think that, the appeals process, if there was an appeals process, would go to our local appeal officer. But without that statute ordinance being written and described out specifically, it would be a local appeals process.
Yeah, that's exactly, just like a parking ticket.
Just again, to jump onto her question. So this doesn't go through the normal process that like if you stop somebody today and gave them a ticket for speeding or going through a red light and they decided that they were gonna fight it, it goes to court.
Yes.
This doesn't go that path.
No, this is more of a civil, correct me if I'm, this is more of a civil process.
Gotcha.
And typically a ticket would go, our e-tickets go to the Central Infractions Bureau. You would have a responsibility to either pay or plea. That would then go through the court, avail itself of the due process. And you could end up in court or before a traffic magistrate, traffic court, if you so choose. This is more of the civil process pay and if there was a local, we developed a local process for appeals, and that would go through local process. But I will say that a $50 or $75 fine is far less than if a police officer caught you at those same speeds.
Right.
Those fines are higher.
Yes,
So
sir.
typically I would think, and I don't know, like I said, a subject matter expert here, and I'm just going on with my research. I would think that I might be more inclined to fight a $350 ticket to see what I can do in court versus a $50 ticket. So, but I don't know what the experience, I don't know what the appeals process percentage would look like. But,
I based upon what you were saying, what I think would happen once the ordinance is done, we do something like we used to do with the parking tickets. If somebody got a parking ticket in town.
Right.
And they wanted to appeal it, the town had somebody as a volunteer that reviewed those parking tickets. And either you convince them to pay their ticket, or you tell them that, okay, and if it's not paid within 30 days, then we send it to the court.
I think that's.
The process has been in place over that.
Equal answer.
So there is an avenue.
As an attorney to do that.
I'm gonna write, everyone's getting tickets. They're speeding over.
Well suited. Yes, great question.
So if the person just chooses to ignore the citation, would that also be written up in the ordinance as to what would happen, or how is that determined if they just decide to ignore it?
It goes to third-party collections eventually within the confines of state collections law. So
Okay.
every state is different in what it allows for those tickets.
Mhm.
Connecticut, it goes to third-party collections. In other states, it's a registration hold for in-state residents typically, but that's not the case in Connecticut.
Okay.
This is new legislation. There may be a 2.0 or 3.0 as things evolve the next 2 or 3 years. But certainly it's good legislation from the get-go. It's been well thought out, and the guidelines from the DOT are well thought out as well. But typically you'll typically find in states that have late legislation like this, that out of the gate payment rates are around about 78, 79%. For first notice that goes out. Typically, if you don't pay your first notice or take action by transferring or contesting, the vendor would send a second reminder notice. In Connecticut, you're not allowed to add a late fee, so it's the same $50 fine, for example. And you have an extra bit of time to pay it. And that's one of the decisions on the part of the community. You get to decide when is that second notice sent, after 35 days, after 40 days, and then how long do you wait after that before you may be sending it to second or third-party collections efforts. So typically, in the long game with the collections efforts, the voluntary payment doctrine, you'd get up to around about the high 80s or 90% payment, low 90s. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's all that I have. That's enough.
I think you commented that you could set the cameras to adjust certain times of the day.
In school zones where the speed limit may be reduced during the school time and then it goes to a high level in the evening, you can also marry the cameras to that so that they're enforcing at a higher speed limit in the evenings or weekends than when the school's in session, for example.
Okay. Yep. My concern is certain time on 140, which comes off the highway, you got all the traffic lights. Coming off the highway, certain times, depending on what the state determines, they turn from red lights to flashing lights, and they flash and you treat it as a stop sign. Would you pick up those violations also?
Yeah, you can change the behavior of the camera to marry the changing road conditions in terms of traffic.
So that would turn from a flashing.
Yeah.
And you could. How does it know that the yellow flashing is somebody going through
Well, if it.
and not stopping for that yellow flashing?
So good question. So the triggering system itself on the camera can be programmed to determine if they're stopping on a flashing red or if it's a solid red or
Okay.
yellow. Yeah.
All right.
So we program that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's really super interesting for especially hearing about this for the first time. And thanks for the presentation. It's really comprehensive. And thanks for the answer about the low percentage of people from the community that gets tickets. Because first concern is, are we going to overburden our residents, especially for driving 10 or 12 miles over the speed limit, which is pretty common, I think, and typical, and maybe not considered to be the worst thing in the world. So, so I don't want to overburden people. And so the other side of it that's not really being addressed yet, which I hope it will be addressed, are the really flagrant, dangerous people. The ones going 50 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, the ones going 70 miles an hour through a red light. Maybe in the future, we should have something where we could live feed that information to law enforcement to say, someone just blew 70 miles an hour through red light, 2 o'clock in the morning, and alert law enforcement to maybe a drunk driver, a dangerous driver, because those are the real fatalities. The correcting behavior as you're doing is something so important for a small community like ours. Yeah. People think that big communities is a problem, but small communities, especially in rural roads and And I think by adjusting behavior on different sides of town, will carry over to the rest of the town. That's the whole thought. But the really dangerous people, the ones that are, it's like the law-abiding citizens are gonna follow the rules and are gonna change the behavior. And the ones that are drunk driving or just don't care are gonna kill people. They're not gonna care. So in the future, if you can get like, talk about getting live feeds or stricter punishments for those flagrant violators, really dangerous people, let's do that.
So that technology already exists within the cameras typically, right? But the use of that technology is restricted to what state legislation allows with that enforcement system. So in some states where there are no restrictions on what you can do with the camera and how you can use the data it produces, we're able to offer those services to the law enforcement community. If someone blows through at 2 a.m, we can snap a picture and send a text message to the chief's phone at 2 a.m. with the license plate of the car.
Love those.
Connecticut doesn't allow that. So we won't be sending that text message.
Well, I'm just gonna take care of the words.
But who knows, if there's legislation 2.0, then maybe that would be one of the
But
things.
to just add to that, you make a good point, and this is when my consideration of looking at this, and like I said, I felt a certain way, and I know that Deputy Chief felt a certain way, and everybody looks at it and says, geez, there's no human touch to that thing. And so our officers, I say we stop up to 50 cars a shift if we're able to, and we have those extra guys and girls that are on extra duty for a writ. But they typically are not always writing tickets, but to your point, they will write tickets if they're the egregious ones you're talking about, 15, 20 miles an hour over. What was the behavior? What did it look like? But in looking at this, the technology is there with the LPRs, the license plate readers, the flock cameras, the fixed cameras that we have in the community already that are giving us license plate readbacks and things like that. And so technology is there, and as it evolves to what you're talking about, and the legislation makes the 2.0, 3.0, I think it's fair to bring this forward to the community and say, you know what, this is something that's going to be out there in the future. That's a force multiplier for shaping the behavior, lowering speeds on the road. And it's not with the signage, it's not like you're coming up to it, you don't know it's there, or certainly if you got caught once, you wouldn't know it was there. So, but I just want to stress, like, I just think it deserves to move forward, is my opinion. If it doesn't, it doesn't, but I think the community should have a say in what that looks like. Keith, anything else?
No, thank you.
Al, anything from you?
Nothing further.
So, you said that Sergeant Knowles has been working on what this might look like.
She's prepared. Not to speak tonight, but she's prepared. She's allowed to speak tonight on that, because we're not done.
I would be comfortable looking at a draft of that once it's ready, if that's not a waste of time for you guys. Okay, great. So keep up the good work.
All right.
Chief, thank you. Andrew, thank you very much for taking time to be here again. Adam, thanks for setting this up.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Let me just grab my,
Yes,
Thankful.
great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask that we take agenda item 9 each up so that we can get the police officers on their way?
I move we take up agenda item 9H.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so this one was this is one of the 2 late additions to the agenda. Chief Carl had just stepped out of the room, but Deputy Chief Murphy is still here. There is an application opportunity for a DOJ Community Policing Development Micro Grant. That is pretty much the extent of what I know about this, but I'll invite them to tell us what they're going after and what they need us to do.
Thank you, sir. I'll try not to bewilder the point because it's 9 and I'm also hungry as well. So, but I will speak on something actually. This is a program which was basically delegated down to finding the funding from Sergeant Knowles. For those of you who aren't familiar with Sergeant Knowles, she's one of the most talented police officers we have. In my 6 months, I found her incredibly capable, and she's handling a lot of stuff with grants for us. Grants are wonderful if you're not familiar with them because they get us, one, it's money that's not coming from taxpayers generally, federally, yes, but not local. But number 2, it gets us resources. Often equipment, best for us generally is training, and that's basically the biggest rub, which we're looking for in 2024. The program which we're looking to bring in will be completely funded through this grant. It's called Dedication to Community. A quick cliff note on this program. For those of you who aren't aware, Chief Carl and I both attended the FBI National Academy in 2019. That training, the Cadillac of training for the United States law enforcement, you get to pick classes you want to go to. One of the courses I took was called Breaking Barriers, Building Better Communities, taught by a gentleman named M. Quentin Williams. Mr. Williams developed this course, Dedication to Community, where he goes around the United States. It's a nationally recognized nonprofit where basically they're providing education to officers and stakeholders in the community, as well as building better communities. Now, truth be told, not to be disingenuous, I'm a faculty member. When they come to the New England area, I get invited to speak on his behalf. Prior to coming here to East Windsor, I worked for 21 and a half years in the city of New Britain. Very much more diverse community than we have here, although we have our segments of diversity here in East Windsor. Mr. Williams reached out to me as my instructor down there and said, hey, I like your concept, the community policing you did. We want you speaking on behalf of how to build better community relations. 21st century policing basically dictates now you build good relations by building trust and legitimacy. What this program does is Mr. Williams comes in with his cadre. We have everyone from people from former NBA player Knicks, Marcus Camby would sometimes arrive, other high enforcement police officers or officials from the United States. Mr. Williams, who was my instructor, former FBI agent, federal prosecutor, philanthropist now, just somebody who I look up to deeply and consider a good friend. What they do is they put up meetings for 8 to 10 hour programs where they invite community members, stakeholders, educators, business people, elected officials to sit in the same room as police officers, and both people get to talk, right? So when we talk about community relations nowadays, you think, oh, police are going to go out there and have pizza and hand out ice cream with kids. That's important. That does, the humanistic side, but we're still wearing a uniform. We would be remiss if we said in 2024 that there is not a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings. I will tell you from being a police officer for over 22 years, over half of my life, 90% of the community does not know what we do and how we do it. And that's one of the reasons right now why we're doing a Citizens Police Academy, to provide information, to talk with people, right? You see Deputy Chief Murphy in front of you, but I'm a father, I'm a coach, I'm a volunteer. I want people to understand that. This is my job, my profession, I love it. And that's what they really bring home. And what he does also, from dedication to communities point aspect, he brings forward to the police the concerns. A lot of maybe young officers don't understand the concerns of the community or the stakeholders or the faith-based community. So getting everyone in the same room to talk, right? Civil discourse, talking about concerns, talking about and getting rid of those misnomers. And this program has been wildly received. There's a website, you can look it up, Dedication to Community. They're often down in Miami. He's coming back up here, but with the funding which Sergeant Knowles has put in for, we're gonna try to put in 3 25-member classes. We're gonna take priority for the first one here in East Windsor. And that's not just for all of East Windsor police officers. That's bringing community members, our elected officials. I would be remiss if I said, folks, if you miss a huge opportunity, if you didn't take an opportunity to join that and bring in the folks who work in this community, all of us collectively. We are one team. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. It's important to get everyone in that same room talking, and that's how we're going to get progress done, all of us. So I implore us to accept this. It's going to be a great opportunity. What we're also going to get to do is when we host this here, that's also going to bolster us in the region too. Chief Carl, big initiative he's had so far is helping out with the regionalization, reaching out to Granby, South Windsor, some of the surrounding towns to say, hey, send some of your folks here. You can take part in this training too. And so everybody's going to get to see the face and kind of learn and hear this message more. It's just going to benefit us. It's certainly, and I see the utility of it with younger officers, getting them in there and hearing this message. Because, Chief Carl, I could sit up there as brass and talk to him about how important community engagement, but when you actually hear it from outside people and see how it's important and hear stories of, hey, this is what we've done to improve relations, that goes much farther than just maybe watching a video or a handout. So that's kind of the dedication to a community in a nutshell. I'll answer any questions anybody has, or I'll sit down.
Is this DOJ grant, micro grant competitive?
If I may, yes, sir. So we're putting in with agencies around the country, we've been working with dedication to community to speak with other agencies who are putting them in to make sure that ours is encompassing and what we need to move it forward, and also make sure that our costs are covered, so that this isn't a bad surprise later. There's no cost match. If put through, this would cover the training for all officers, the staff to come up and do the training, and then overtime on the backside as well.
So I heard you say there's no municipal match.
No, sir.
Questions or comments?
I just want to say, going through the police academy for the community, he's absolutely right when he says, you think you know what the police officers do in town. You don't have a clue what the police officers do in town. They have changed so much over the last 10 years. It's like, well, when did that happen? What a great idea. It has progressed so much and it's continuing to progress. This is just an addition to that, as far as I'm concerned. We do National Night Out, police department doing things out in the community, but this will give people a voice at a particular time to speak, which is really impressive. Because there's a lot of stuff happening out there that nobody really knows about. And I think if we start surfacing with the public speaking about it, it'll certainly make their job a lot easier moving forward. So I support it 100%.
Can I just add to that, Mr. Souza? You know, one of the things when police officers, particularly executive level officers, one of the things you see often, and we don't do a good job of this in this country, in our profession, is talking about difficult topics. We could sit there and do coffee with the cop. You know what they talk to us about? Traffic. Every time traffic. Listen to that. But what are our biggest concerns, right? What do you hear and see on social media? Police brutality, racial profiling, disparate treatment of people. Those are things that people want to talk about. Shame on us as leaders of this profession not to address those elephants in the room. Dispel misnomers, hear people's concerns. A grievance to somebody, whether it's real or not, is a grievance to somebody. Maybe just talking it out and hearing it, someone hearing what you have to say. And that's why this program is so important. I feel very passionate about it. And I think this is just, it's a shot in the arm for our community. And when people get in their own room and start talking, that's when, you know, healing's done, acknowledgement's done, and it's just, it benefits us collectively as a town. So.
If I may, just to add on to that, this isn't a one-time, so it is a 3-session training, but the whole program is meant to engage community members and introduce everybody, much like the Citizens Academy has. But I was a midnight sergeant for a very long time, so my face might be new to some because I've usually moved around in the dark, but getting all of our officers out there, creating those channels of communication that might not have been there, and then creating an action plan to move everybody forward. So it's not just that one-time snapshot training, but a way to further embed and continue to integrate as time moves forward.
Just great presentation. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it for all you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
How much is the grant for?
So the grant total will be just over $111,000.
Wow.
That's a micro grant?
Sir.
It'd be nice to be DOJ.
And I just wanted to echo what the deputy first selectman said. I'm also in the Citizens Academy, and our officers, our detectives, and all our staff, our dispatchers are fantastic. And I want to thank you, Sergeant Knowles, for your working on grants, and the 3 of you for everything that you've done for the community and the outreach. It's really a big difference than what it has been. So I think that I'm just very proud of our police department. So thank you.
And the other thing it does, it dispels the rumors that are going around. There's a lot of rumors going around up there, but when you meet the officers and you talk to the officers, you form your own opinion of what's right and what's wrong. So, you know, the police officer is sitting on the street, not paying any attention to anybody going by. You have no idea what he's doing while he's sitting on the corner of the street, but you think he's just sitting there on the corner of the street because he don't want to do his job. So those kind of things, it'll help alleviate some of that stuff that's out there. So.
So what do you need from us? Just a motion to move forward with
Just
the
the motion
application?
will give us the blessing from the board, and we'll do what we gotta do on our end.
Do you need a signature from the first selectman?
And we'll be working towards, it's all electronic signatures, so it's great.
Okay. So,
Can I make a motion?
sure.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion to approve, town of East Windsor participating in the US DOJ Community Policing Development Micro Grant Program. And authorizing the, first selectman to sign whatever documents are needed to approve that grant.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great job, guys. And Matt. Appreciate it. Okay. What's up? I was thinking about last, Glenn's not home like this. Okay, so we're gonna turn now to the discussion of the contract for waste and recycling between town and USA Hauling to include the Director of Public Works. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for hanging in there. Sorry to keep you so late. Okay, so we had discussed the framework of the terms that we were comfortable with a number of weeks back. They sent us a draft contract. It was reviewed and edited by Pullman and Conley. All of the changes that Pullman and Conley had requested were accepted by All American Waste, USA Hauling. So that is the document that's now in front of you. If anybody has any questions about the relationship between the town and USA Hauling or about the terms of the contract, Len can answer those. Otherwise, we can go ahead and complete our new trash contract.
Are we voting on this tonight or will we
So that'd be the plan. I mean, unless there's anything, and I can't think of a reason not.
No, I just didn't say. I mean,
I thought of,
Did you?
but I don't need to start. If you want to go ahead.
well, I'll just start. I was not in favor of doing a 10-year contract. I made that known to the board of selectmen previously. I think locking us in on a 10-year contract, especially the rates aren't like cheap. They're still escalating quite a bit. They're cheaper than less than 10 years. But I thought that probably not the best thing to do. So I'm going to listen to everybody else. But I personally am not so sure I want to support a 10-year contract on waste.
Okay, Alex?
I just had two issues with it. One, they had a provision on page 1, section F on organics. It basically just says, if the town ever decides to do something with composting, basically, then you have to do it with us. And there's no terms, no stipulations, no nothing, except for you're locked in with us. So I'd just like to see that removed or, softened, we'd be happy to work with you and take your bid, but we don't know going 10 years out, if that'll ever become a reality, but I just don't want to be locked into it. And two, page 16, the diesel fuel. When we get to it, but so it's basically saying, there's a price that we're including or we're charging you for diesel, and on a per gallon basis that our trucks use, and if the diesel price goes higher, then you're paying it, and if it goes lower, you're still paying it, unless it goes lower than $2.50 a gallon, which if it ever went that low, I'd be shocked. I did look briefly at, diesel prices over time. They're never going to be that low again. So I think that needs adjustment where it's not so lopsided. And, we should at least have a chance of breaking even on this. I mean, the way it's set up now, that if the price is ever over $3.16 a gallon, we have to pay the extra. It's already over that, and it's always going to be over that as far as I can see. That's my opinion anyway. It could be wrong, but it doesn't seem to be getting any cheaper. So I wonder if we need to look at that a little bit closer and adjust both the floor, bringing that up so we possibly have a chance of not having to pay extra, and also their base rate. I think is maybe needs to be a little bit higher. So those are my two concerns.
Okay. Sarah or Marie?
You want to bring the base rate up?
You want to bring the floor up 250, so we don't benefit unless the price of diesel goes below $2.50 a gallon. It's never gonna do that, ever. And so you might as well not even have that stipulation in there.
So what do you want to bring it up to? Do you want to bring it up?
Well,
to
you
360?
know, I'm not a diesel expert and I've only done a little bit of research.
Yeah.
And I brought it back up and I don't think this is all, you know, this is USDA, so it's.
Yeah.
Fairly accurate, but like we need to look at it, I think, a little bit deeper into it and come to an agreement with that. This, you know, I think that's outdated language. None of those prices are realistic.
Ladies?
I agree with Alan on this fuel adjustment. I mean, ultimately, I want to do what's best for the taxpayer. I can see Keith's point about locking in into a 10-year deal, but I don't feel the state talks every year about doing something and they just keep kicking the can down the road. So we don't know what the state is going to come up with for us, but I mean, ultimately, if locking in is now for 10 years is what'll benefit the taxpayer in the long run, I'm in favor of that, but I do feel that there are some things that were mentioned by Alan that need to be looked into.
Maria, anything on your part?
Well, I'm gonna be honest, some of this I didn't understand at all. You know, I'm just gonna be upfront. I didn't see anywhere in here when I was cruising through it and I could have missed it. But there's nothing in here to change anything that we're doing right now. Garbage is being picked up in the households once a week.
Recycling every
Except for
other week.
recycling is every other week. Is there a way to reduce the cost? Because the cost is huge. If we go to like every 2 weeks for regular trash pickup. Because I know I and other people on our street put ours out every other week. We don't put it out every week. So if we're paying for just what's being picked up each week is one thing versus an automatic rate for an automatic settlement.
Len, can you speak to that? Is that a tonnage concern?
Well, the tonnage is gonna be the tonnage.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna end up with the same tonnage, whether they come once a week or every other week. I don't know how they like to run. Obviously, there's a cost associated with running that route. Putting the truck on the road with the driver, the fuel, what have you. So there is a cost associated with that every week. As far as the actual collection, picking up of the trash. I don't know what the difference would be if, I don't even know if any towns actually do what you're saying, you know, pick up.
Like I said, I don't know what.
I don't think you want to, I don't know if you want to change the recycling. That's already every other week, and I mean, we have people asking for more than one recycling bin. I guess it's something we could ask them if they would entertain, or if it's a possibility, or what the savings may be.
I thought we had asked that when we met with Eric.
We asked about a bulk pickup.
Yeah.
Once a month. And the cost of that to the town is, well. It'd be a great thing to have, but the cost would, in our budget times, prohibitive. Again, because not only do you have the tonnage, it's really the tonnage.
Right.
It's the cost of putting that truck on the road.
But if you only have to put that truck on the road every other week rather than every week.
Well, I have to believe there will be a savings to the town if they picked up trash every other week. From the standpoint of the truck actually being on the road and you know, the collection process. The disposal, again, is gonna be the disposal. You know, instead of coming once a week and, you know, getting rid of 200 tons, they're gonna come, you know, that 2-week period, you're gonna get rid of 400 tons that you would have had. I just don't know, I honestly don't know, and they would be a better judge of. I mean, how many barrels are, I mean, I drive around town, you know, a bit, and I see picking it up every week.
Yeah.
I see trash cans that the lid doesn't even
Okay.
close,
Yeah,
they're overflowing.
But-
So you know, then what do we do with those people?
I mean, I'm looking at the 10 years for me, from cost wise, if everything is the way it is. And the fact that there's issues with getting rid of trash, not gonna be our problem for 10 years, it's gonna be their problem to get rid of our trash, it's not gonna be our problem to get rid of trash. But I'm also concerned with the recyclables, we started off with recyclables for just soda bottles. And now juice bottles,
You're talking about single stream?
single stream, yeah, all of that. How much more changes are gonna go down the line over the next 10 years that's gonna change the volume of what's being actually trashed versus what's being recycled through recycling places?
If I read it correctly, some of the, when it talks about that, there is a clause that if something substantial changes in
Yeah.
what the stream is, then either party can go back and say, hey, look, we gotta do something about this.
That's fair, that's fair. And then I don't know, but I guess I missed something somewhere along the years of sitting and thinking. I was always under the impression that condos, part of their condo fees was to remove trash. But this has got,
No, several, one or two contracts ago, I don't know if you remember, but
Obviously
people were
not.
bringing
Yes.
busloads of people in here to get the condos and.
Yeah.
Alan's first time.
yeah,
and-
okay, I remember
and
that.
then the
I mean, not getting sued while I was in office.
and-
But that's what I remember, so that's why I asked you.
No, it was that way. I mean, when I first started here, the condos were responsible for their own.
Right,
The mobile home parks were
Yeah.
responsible for their own.
yeah,
The apartments, I
yeah,
believe, were responsible for their own too. I think we just picked up residential homes.
right,
And then that changed, and then they had to come up with a whole new concept to pick up, some of the condos and mobile home parks actually have, dumpster, front load dumpster pickup instead of individual, because they don't have any place to put the individual cans for the units.
right.
So that's a whole different thing as well.
So all of these locations that you have listed here are all being serviced by
Correct.
currently.
Yeah, and subsequent to the garbage wars, they came back and wanted the town to pick up the cost of hydrants and streetlights.
Right.
And that did not.
Did
happen.
not. Right, because I was sick for a couple of years, so I was out of the loop for a couple of years, so I just was wondering where that transpired.
They were bringing people in by the busload.
Interesting. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, so, I got a couple of things to go back to those folks on. Can I have a motion to postpone this, please? I've got an updated draft.
Make motion to postpone the authorization of the new, contract with All American Waste.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
I,
Opposed? Vote.
We did spend a little larger next time for those of us that. Suffer.
That is the fine print, Marie. That's.
Didn't really hope because it only does a couple of words at a time.
Okay, let's take up 9I, so Mr. Speciale can take his leave. Discuss and potentially vote on the approval of the request from the Trolley Museum for sponsorship through the Neighborhood Assistance Act. You guys, most of you, were here for the public hearing. We've worked with these folks before a couple of times. Mike explained what their proposal is. Are there any questions or comments for him? Mike, are you still with us?
I am.
Okay,
I'm enjoying the meeting.
I think we're straightforward. That's all.
would someone like to make a motion?
Go ahead, Alan, it's all yours.
I would go, but I don't have the language in front of me. What's the name of the grant?
It's Neighborhood Assistance Act.
I'll make a motion that that we approve the town sponsoring the
Neighborhood
Assistance Act, grant applications for the Trolley Museum.
second,
Discussion? All in favor?
I,
And then we give them the legitimately.
Oh, it's Connecticut Electric
The
Railway
Connecticut Electric
Association.
Railroad Association, we accept that. from
Yes.
them.
As amended, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you all for your support.
Sorry to keep you hanging around that long.
Okay, thank you.
Our next item of business is tax refunds.
Can I do them both in one motion or do they need to be separate?
They could probably be the same.
Okay, I'll move,
They're both 9G, so
okay, I'll move to approve the tax refunds totaling $5,991.03.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right. Selectmen's reports. On May 6th, the town held a groundbreaking ceremony for the new community center. We were delighted to have more than 120 people in attendance, as well as Senator Blumenthal and USDA Rural Development Southern New England Director Scott Soares. This project is now fully underway and will be completed on or before May 1st of next year. On Tuesday, voters overwhelmingly approved the town budget and the Broadbrook Fire Department budget. Town budget received 68% support, although turnout has remained low for several years. This was a low turnout, but it wasn't an abnormally low one. But that said, there were a number of outreach attempts to alert voters to the vote, including 2 townwide phone calls, a townwide mailing, an email to all town notification subscribers, and articles in the 5 Village Voice and the North Central News. I don't know how else to get the word out there. I mean, any tool we have, we're using. Today, town staff and I met with the Capital Region Council of Governments to discuss sources of potential state and federal funding for local transportation and streetscape improvement initiatives outlined in the Route 5 corridor study. The intention was to reach out to CROG and engage them more as a partner for their access to different funding sources and engage their expertise so that we could try and make some progress on that. The conversation was a big help in identifying some of those funding sources, and proposals may be brought to the Board of Selectmen in the coming months as those application windows become open. The senior farmers market nutrition vouchers will be available in June. These are available to certain low-income senior citizens for redemption at area farmers markets. Social Services has more information on that. Our summer concert series is restarting on June 20th, and we'll run almost every Thursday throughout the course of the summer. In conjunction with those, we're also going to be running pop-up farmers markets then and there. So there will be another opportunity for seniors qualifying through the Seniors Farmer Market Nutrition Program to use their vouchers, but also for the general public to support local agriculture. Mark your calendars for a few events in the coming weeks. This Saturday is the Arts and Culture Committee's second annual Arts and Culture Day. Sarah will probably have more on that, so I'll leave that for her. Memorial Day weekend is next weekend, and there are 2 opportunities to commemorate the day in East Windsor. On May 26th, the Melrose Day Parade will be from Melrose School to Melrose Cemetery. The shortest parade in America.
Second shortest, 750 feet.
Is the second shortest?
Second shortest.
Are you kidding? What's the first?
750 feet from start to finish.
What's the shortest? You gotta let me know. Not right now, but. The next day, the Warehouse Point Memorial Day Parade will be held on or around the Memorial Green. That begins at 10 a.m. We hope that folks can join us for one or both of those events. And on June 2nd, the town will hold a ribbon cutting and officially open our new playground in East Windsor Park. That event will be held from 11 to 2, and we'll have live music, food trucks, a Kona ice truck, games, and giveaways. Special thanks to Representative Jamie Foster for securing the state funding to help make that happen. We certainly hope that folks can come and bring their kids and grandkids and neighbors' kids and anybody's kids and come and enjoy what's going to be a really fun day. Hopefully, the police department will be there too.
Paw Patrol.
Get out. My kids are gonna go nuts. That's all I have. Marie?
Yep, the only thing I have is, due to Jason being out of, East Windsor at the time, I was, asked to do the grand opening for Frankie B's over in Windsorville. And I was impressed by the number of takeout orders they were receiving in the hour and a half that I was there. if you haven't been there, I suggest you go. They do deli foods, they do sandwiches, they do snacks, so you want lunch, that's the place to go. You want breakfast, that's the place to go. They're getting a lot of business from construction workers around town, which is good. Takeout orders, they call them in ahead of time. Turnout was turnout was pretty good. There was probably, half a dozen or so non-related people that were there, which was good. I had the opportunity to have lunch with, both the Lasners who showed up. I can vouch that the, pastry products that they put out were good. Made several attempts to, come out with them. Thought he was on notice, but we caught it. So
I'm just going by civic duty, what can I?
I know, but have an opportunity to go up there. The other thing, still looking for people to step forward and sign up for boards and commissions in town. Particularly, we're looking for, people for the Water Pollution Control Authority. We're down two. Like to get at least one more sooner than later. Their last meeting I attended, they didn't have a quorum, because of the session, state session session at the Capitol building, and one of the individuals on the board wasn't able to attend, so, and the Park and Rec meeting was canceled that I was to go to because of the early voting.
All right, gee,
Nothing today.
all right. Al. So the shortest parade in America is in Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's 98 feet. There you go. I'd also like you to know that Vernon claims to have the shortest parade, but it's a quarter mile, so we need to speak to them.
I would be delighted to do this.
But in all seriousness, I had one of my liaison meetings, and that was the Planning and Zoning Committee. They just had a site plan modification for 245 South Main Street, looking for rephasing there, pretty much run of the mill. But more importantly for us, and probably and for everybody in the room here, is the POCD survey is still open. It's open till June 1. They've had 150 responses, and they did give a kind of a draft presentation of some of the answers to some of the questions. One was a little humorous. It was, they asked, why did you move to Connecticut, to East Windsor? And I think it was like 23% of the people didn't know why. So, I don't know. You've just been here a long time. But so anyway, really the point is though, talk up to POCD, I don't think 150 responses is really representative of 11,000 people in the community. Everybody cites it when they want something done, but we need more input. So make sure you get your friends and family out there to do the survey. That's all I need.
All right. Sure.
On May 6th, I also attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the community center. I'm really delighted to see this project move forward. Later that evening, the Warehouse Point Fire District held their special annual meeting. The fiscal year 2024-2025 budget was unanimously adopted. Charlie Nordell and Kevin Clinch were re-elected to the commission to serve an additional 3-year term. And Rachel Safford was re-elected as chairman, John Burnham vice chairman, and D. James Barton treasurer. There were 60 fire calls in the month of April through May 6th. On May 24th, the Arts and Culture Committee met. Oh, not May 24th, that's wrong, 14th, sorry. It was a positive meeting. The members of the committee work very well together and do a great job of encouraging each other to participate and brainstorm. As Jason mentioned, Arts and Culture Day is this Saturday, May 18th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. at East Windsor Park. The event is free, and this is their second annual, and it's going to be even bigger and better than last year. There will be live music, 3 food trucks. There will be 10 local artists that will be vendors showcasing and selling their work. There's also going to be a birdhouse contest for people to vote in different categories. And there's an art store in Plainville that donated gift certificates. I think it's Dick Blake. And they donated gift cards for the winner of each category as a prize. Committee members will be working with the American Heritage River Commission and will be painting the can receptacle, which is on Route 140 in between Harrington Road and Main Street.
Nice.
Artist and committee member Sharon Acria will be painting the next book that students read at Broadbrook Elementary School this year to the One School, One Book mural, which is outside the cafeteria. Stay tuned for updates. In the Agnes Gallery located at 100 Main Street in the Broadbrook section of town, we'll be hosting a photography exhibit showcasing 4 East Windsor High School students' work on May 23rd from 6:30 to 7:30. And then just a reminder of another event on Saturday, the East Windsor Garden Club will hold their annual plant tag and bake sale at the Melrose Schoolhouse from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's what I have.
Excellent, thank you.
That's not it.
This coming Saturday, yep,
18th or 25th.
the 18th.
Okay, so we're going to turn now to public participation, the second opportunity for members of the public to address the board. I'll first ask anybody in the room to address the members by stating their name and their address, and then stating their business. Provide Noreen an opportunity after that. Yes, ma'am.
Patricia Sherry, 119 Depot Street, Broadbrook. This is a question for Mr. David. Where is the survey?
Oh, it is on the East Windsor town website.
I can't find it.
I will be posting about it, so on Facebook, and I have it on my computer. I can get it to you afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
It is under news and announcements, but it's been pushed down a bit because there have been other things that have superseded it. You know, more current pieces of information, so
What could supersede a survey?
the budget results, the budget mailer,
Okay.
it's a stream of real-time things happening, so it gets pushed further down.
I looked for it, but.
Yeah, it's in the,
Good point, we can relist
they have
that.
it on the planning and zoning agendas typically, and it's also in their section of the thing, but I'll give it to you.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir, name and address, please.
Her husband, when you share Depot Street. I couldn't find it either. This pushing down thing.
Yeah.
Why in the world are you pushing it down? Why is it set up this way? You can't find things on this. I've looked for many things. It's just so difficult to maneuver.
Well, I'll tell you, we had a meeting today with a potential new vendor for the website, which would redesign it and make it actually ADA compatible. It's a little early in the process, but the concerns are noted and people
Yeah,
are.
if people do the survey each year, number one thing. What's the problem in the town? The students from Mass, I believe it is. And it says it's the website. And it's the website. And it's the website. I mean, knock on the door how many times?
Well, it's not it's they were talking about having a comms person.
And also. The police force. Represented here. I've never met a better group of fellows and ladies. I've never had a bad incident except once with it. And it was their fault. But seriously, these gentlemen are so courteous, it's amazing. Even the people I dealt with over at the police force besides them, they're all very helpful and very, very professional.
I've told the chief privately, and I'll say publicly, that I brag about our police department
I do
everywhere
too.
I go.
What a bunch of fellows. And secondly, this traffic deal, with the eyeballs on everybody, I don't like it.
Oh, I.
Come back next time.
The things that I do like is, yes, it's gonna put the eye on people, but it's not gonna help fatalities. It can't, because the fatality will be an after effect of somebody speeding. In other words, you got them speeding, but you know, the guy just wiped out a family. I don't see how that helps.
That might be a takeaway that the police department could do some research on for further explanation.
Okay, and, if I remember the statement the man made, Mr. Noble, he said that it's just an infraction or it doesn't tie in, doesn't tie into your license. So what's the point? There's no punishment except $50 or something like that.
Change driver's behavior, you know.
So I can get as many $50 as I want. Well, there's got to be a limit on this.
I'd like to think that, if, like, you got head enough times, you move your head, right? So. I mean,
But it's not me, it's the people from out of town who said so.
Right.
So they're gonna say hit $50. See that one?
Maybe like, I mean.
They caught me this time. And another thing is that once you open this door, you open Pandora's box, okay? They're not tying it in today. Not the police force, but the state is not tying it in today, but boy, I tell you, I just went through one heck of a year with insurances, all kinds of insurances. And they are just demanding so much. And if they tie this into your insurance, you're dead. Once you get a picture, it's anybody's picture. It's not your picture anymore. It's out there.
I suppose you could stop speeding.
Well, you know what? You get caught one speeding, for example, your insurance will go crazy. They have the opportunity to just say, we're gonna drop you. You're opening up the door to Big Brother. That's my kind of feeling that I want to get out there.
I think he's here already.
Yeah, well, on one side, yeah, but that's my feeling. You won't figure it out.
Yes, sir, and then, your second.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go, Tom.
Kings Court, Rodbrook. You got a question mostly directed toward Carl. These traffic cameras, are they gonna be quick enough to take a picture of a train going through a traffic intersection? You know what I mean by that?
Well, they're fast.
I'm seeing more and more of it. It's not like one car goes through, 2, 3, sometimes 4 cars follow through.
Yeah, they would stop them all the very quick. Faster than we are.
They better be pretty quick,
Yeah.
because they're pretty close together. Do
So
something
like all of this, like I said before, this is all for the community to decide, because it needs a certain way, and you know, Mr. Sherry feels a certain way. I don't know if his wife feels the same way, but then we'll stay out of that. Domestically, but we'll put it in Paul.
I gotta stop on a green light and wait for these things to go through.
We'll see.
Paul, Yes, Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Providence. P O C D survey. I took the survey, I thought it was great. I'm very impressed with the way it was put together. I had an interesting time finding it as well, but besides that. And by the way, putting it on paper somewhere means people have to type the URL, and it's not that convenient for most people. Clicking works, you know, click, I agree, I'm done with them. All right, but
The QR code, you just jogged my memory, in the Village Voice, the link, as I wrote it here for you, and the QR code are in there.
my my computer doesn't read QR codes. I would never use a phone.
Yeah, the link is there.
Like that, you know. But anyhow, here's the issue that I want to bring up, and you're not gonna be able to do anything about it, but it's important. You take the survey. And you're using Survey Monkey, which is a web-based thing, and that's fine, okay? And they tie that survey you put in to your IP address. Which means that you're the only one in the household who can fill out that survey. If somebody else wants to do it, it says you already did.
Wow.
Do it under.
It goes by IP address, your house has one.
No, you have one for each computer.
I'm sorry.
in the household.
All right, made the point.
I didn't say how many computers, I said how many people.
You can do it on your phone too.
So what?
It's another IP address.
Big deal. That's not the point,
Okay.
okay? It could be 4 people in the household, use the same computer, do the same process, but no, they cannot. Now, it's not something that's fixable, because they have to do this, and I don't disagree. I just think it's good information that if you use this computer and you do it, then that computer can no longer do it again. Doesn't matter who the people are, it's not identifying the people. And I think that's the way it has to be, but it's gonna reduce the number you're gonna get. And I think the more numbers you get, the better off you are. I don't have a cure for it, because I know the concept. The company, Survey Monkey, has no choice but to try to do it this way to make it work, because they don't want it to be flooded with a bunch of surveys. So that's, I just wanted to point it out. You gotta use different devices.
Thinking of how many devices are in my house.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other, yes, ma'am. I do that with everybody. Name and address, please.
Gary Biggerl, 57 Depot Street, Robert. I too would like to commend the police department for their community involvement. And I'm going back to Easter Sunday morning, when we had a visit from Officer Sanchez at 5:30 in the morning, and checked on us because there were lights on at our church while we were preparing breakfast. She got a call, fortunately, was able to get back somehow, have breakfast with us, take a tour of the church, and just overall, a great community involvement. And thank you. And thank her.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Now they can't wear hats, because they're temperature swelling. I thought that's what we're coming out here to make it done.
We take care of that.
Any other public comment?
Just remember, it only takes one bad act
Yes.
for all the others to be ignored.
That's right, yep.
Any other public comment? Noreen, anything from you?
Yes. First of all, your meetings never go this late, and I'm like trying to stay awake over here. I actually wanna just talk about, well, not talk about, a suggestion, I guess, regarding the whole registrar of voters situation. That you're all gonna go do some research on, which I think is appropriate, but I think it's appropriate that since those documents were put out with, people's names on them, individual people's names on them, relative to their pay, which is all public information, I'm entitled to have it, but I think they also have the right individually to determine if that should be talked about in executive session versus public session. Everybody in their employment capacity has a right to have their particular issue discussed privately. So I think if you're gonna go talk to everybody about, do they have a problem with it, I think perhaps it would be best to also ask them if they want that discussed publicly or in executive session, in order to not violate FOIA issues. That's it. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you very much. We will have an executive session just to include the 5 members of the board. May I ask for a motion to go into executive session?
Move that we go into executive session at 9:49 PM.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in executive session at 9:49 PM. No action will follow. It's 10:01. We're out of executive session. No further business comes before the board of selectmen. A motion to adjourn would be in order. Is there a motion?
Move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay. Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Alan. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 10:01.